small the water taxis or Zodiacs.
The October 14th meeting of the East Penn Board of School Directors is hereby called to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first order of business is requests to address the board. We have none, so moving on to approval of minutes. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to presentations. You want to take the...
Yes, I have a brief intro because we have an action-packed evening. I wanted to just start off by emphasizing that over the past year, a focus for our leadership team has been to build a district culture in which innovation and risk-taking are fostered. Multiple educational authors and researchers have studied this notion of creating a culture of innovation and recognize that creating such a culture is the responsibility of everyone, all of us in the organization. We also know that creating such a culture requires a delicate balance of having a clear vision for where we're going, while being able to have the courage to maybe shake up some traditional school experiences that still have value, but instead by also creating new, authentic learning experiences for our students. This evening, we have leaders from our curriculum and instruction team who are joining us, as well as an amazing teacher leadership team who are filling the audience this evening. And they're here to share several new learning opportunities that we would like to offer our students beginning in the upcoming school year. I want to personally recognize the leadership of our C&I team, particularly Mrs. Murphy, Mr. Mahalik, and Mrs. James, and again, also recognize the leadership of the individuals who are in the audience. I want to appreciate and thank them for their ongoing work in inspiring innovation in East Penn. And now I'm going to turn the presentation over to them. And you might notice in your agenda there are 3 different presentations that are identified, and we will certainly allow time for transition and question in between the 2, but the goal would be that we would, after each presentation and question session, we'll then move right into the next one. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Thank you so much for having us here with you this evening to first present some revised humanities curriculum to you. So over the last, I would say 2 years, we have been revising the 6 through 12 English curriculum and the 6 through 12 social studies curriculum. Part of this revision and the curriculum documents associated with it, you will see that we have looked to represent the learning outcomes that we expect of all of our students. So as a district, we have committed to our Portrait of a Graduate, and we then have also committed to making sure that we're providing learning opportunities to all of our students so that they can foster those skills and attributes present in the Portrait of a Graduate. We also wanted to mention that the skills and attributes that you see, again, in those curriculum documents would be further differentiated by track through the complexity of text that we're engaging students in the classroom, as well as the expectations for their formal writing assignments, and then also the level of independence expected of each of those learners. In addition, I also wanted to mention budget requirements. There are no substantial purchases associated with the 2 curriculums that the Humanities Department is going to present to you this evening. So any purchases that would be necessary would be managed within the C&I budget. Okay? So first, I want to introduce you to the secondary English team. Representing all of the writers that were part of this work this evening are Erin Connect, who is our middle school department chair and a 6th grade ELA teacher, Denise Broski, who is a 6th and 7th grade reading seminar teacher, Justine Franson, our high school department chair and also an 11th and 12th grade English teacher, and Bridget Doklin, who is an 11th and 12th grade English teacher. So I'm going to turn the mic over to them.
Good evening. First of all, you're probably thinking, what are some of the things that are going to stay the same? Thank you. First of all, we're going to keep our increased focus in our writing, and the rigor is going to stay the same. And that expectation is going to run from K through 12th. We will also, in terms of text complexity, we want to continue to increase that as the students progress through the grades. That will also not change.
Next is some of the highlights from the new curriculum. So the new curriculum is based on the workshop model. In the workshop model, teachers teach whole group lessons in mini lessons, so 10 to 15 minutes of mini lessons, and then it allows for students to work on those lessons while the teacher is able to work in small groups with students and conference with students one-on-one and really differentiate. There's a lot of student choice in writing and in reading, which allows for further differentiation. And also it's very project-based, so a lot of hands-on learning in the classroom during the workshop model, and allows for our objectives to support the portrait of a graduate. Success with this new curriculum will look like students wanting to read and write, increasing their stamina and the volume that they're able to write in a class period. There are going to be a lot more risks that they're willing to take regarding their reading and writing.
And continuing with that, that's one of our goals. We want the kids to be risk takers, and if they are risk takers, they're going to be more apt to talk more analytically with other students about books, and also respond more analytically to each other's writing.
Hi. At the high school level, this is very similar to what you just heard from the middle school teachers. There are two main components that are staying the same throughout the curriculum revision process. The first is very important to us as a department, and that is to maintain the level of rigor that we've established at Emmaus High School, and of course making sure that we increase that level of rigor as students progress through the grade levels. That applies to not only the readings that they're doing in terms of text complexity, but also the level of expectation in their writing. In addition to that, we are going to continue to expose them to both classic texts and also more contemporary titles.
Hi. We're really excited about some of the changes that we're going to be able to make with this new curriculum. Typically, or I should say currently, our classes are based on either a survey format or chronologically, and we'll be moving to a theme-based curriculum, and that really allows students to make much more personal connections to what we're reading and what we are writing. We've made an effort to unpack the standards into individualized skills, and that really helps us be able to more accurately measure if students are able to perform at that skill level, and of course what we need to do to help them. We've had a drive for many years now to switch from a teacher-centered classroom to a student-centered classroom, and this again will come from the workshop model. And what's really cool about this is that this is going to allow the students to work through both the reading and the writing process, focusing on the areas that they have an individual need in. So besides the just, the classroom presentation, we can really hone in on the skills that they need. Students will enjoy a whole lot more choice as far as literary titles, different assessment types, and areas of inquiry, again, able to personalize the curriculum. And the curriculum is now being written in a way that we can really expose the students to a variety of authors from around the world, recognizing that they really are a member of a global community. With the internet and the one-on-one that we have available now at East Penn, it's opened up this whole new world of literature to them that they weren't getting in just a textbook. As far as the markers of success and how we're going to know that the students are getting what they need, they will be writing across all modes, and what's really different is that they'll be producing works for an authentic audience. Unlike, for many years it's been, well, I wrote this essay for my English teacher, but maybe it's, I wrote this, to a member of the community, or to a government official, or to an employer. Students will be able to engage in independent reading. We've made a big push for this, and what's great about that is they have the opportunity to not only share what they've read, but make connections with other students and what they've gone through. And lastly, they'll be assessed, of course, formally with Keystone exams and traditional classroom tests, but also they'll have the opportunity to share their own feedback and their interests, which will then further guide our instruction in the classroom. Do you have any questions for the 6 through 12 ELA? Yes.
Most of my questions are just, the presentation went by really fast, and I'm also, so a lot of the terms that you used, I don't really know what they mean in real life. The word risk-taking was mentioned a lot, but I didn't really understand how, like, the workshopping and mini lessons and other things relate to risk-taking. And I'm wondering if maybe you could say it in a non-educator language way.
If you think of the traditional classroom, teachers giving instruction, students do A, B, and C to get to D, and then we all check off that we did it and we move on. Now we can present a concept to you and say, all right, what do you want to learn about this? Okay. And the students are really put into the driver's seat, and that's where the risk comes in, because it's not so formulated like we typically have. They may fail, but as we all know, when you fail, it's often when you learn the most. So I think does that help as far as where that picture is going?
And then that also sounds like a massive change, and so I'm wondering, how do you take this ideal and make it a reality and create that change when you have, I don't know how many teachers there are that are going to have to radically change what they do, but it seems like what is the plan for that?
Well, fortunately, we've been taking pieces of this throughout the years and trying new things. As far as, if you took the traditional 40-minute class period where it used to be the teachers up front and giving that, it is a change to make this into a mini lesson. But, we've been really fortunate to have the professional development to be able to look at exemplars out there, through different presenters and what this looks like. So, I know myself, a few years ago when I started to hear these terms, they were foreign to me as well. But I feel pretty confident that the change, while it's a drastic change, it's really just it's a small change in the classroom. It's a bigger change in philosophy.
I guess that question came from students being able to have more choice over, I might have heard this wrong, but it sounds like they have more choice over what they read. So instead of, for example, telling them to read To Kill a Mockingbird, the student might say, I really want to read some other book. But then what if the teacher hasn't read the book that the student wants to read? I guess that's where I was coming from.
There are 3 levels of connectedness with the text. So there will still be your traditional titles that we all as a class will read. And then we have teacher-selected texts that are our literature circles, meaning you have a list that we have read of 10 books, and you can choose the one that you are most interested in of those 10 books. And then we have the independent reading, and that's really where they have a broad spectrum of choice. That we have not read, but that's just the basic trying to get books into students' hands so that they are building their stamina and vocabulary and interest.
That's great. And then my last question is, you sort of mentioned this. So it's my understanding that the Keystone course is less of everything that you said. And how do you work around that?
I think that we spent a lot of years just really not necessarily teaching to the test, but constantly having that voice here that the test was driving instruction. We're recognizing now that we're really better served by focusing in on the skills, not the test itself. The test, if it's an accurate test, should measure those skills. So if we're working with the children on the skills and making them understand that it's not just for an exam, but rather you're going to use this, to be a good communicator, to be a critical thinker down the road, that's where the Keystone should ideally happen much more organically than here's a packet and, fill in these charts just the way they would be on the test.
Okay. Thank you.
Have you seen examples of where this curriculum has been used in other school districts to measure the success of what you're trying to implement here?
Take this one. She's the expert here.
So yeah, the workshop model is a philosophy that has been around for a very long time and is used in various locations from kindergarten through 12th grade. So it's not necessarily, it's new to us, but it's not a new philosophy. So, you know, there's proof of practice in high schools, middle schools, elementary schools. I would say nationally, and possibly even internationally. I know that even schools in Australia and New Zealand, that this is the kind of practice that they have in their writing and reading instruction also.
And what's the approach with a student that may not be as motivated or may not be as interested?
I feel like, well, from experience, the small group and one-on-one conferencing with students really allows that student to open up and actually take more risks, because if they are reluctant, the teacher has more of an opportunity to get to know what they like and their personal interests, which gives them more buy-in when it comes to writing and reading things for the classroom.
So how is that different than what's being done now with students who may not be as motivated?
I think it just gives this teacher an opportunity to have a better rapport with the students and being able to differentiate better and group students with like abilities, but also like interests. And with that small group instruction, that really allows the teacher to be able to harness a love of reading and writing that maybe wasn't there before.
And you feel because the students have more of an opportunity to select what interests them as opposed to
Absolutely.
just the standard.
Yep.
This is what
Choice for writing and choice for reading definitely gives them more buy-in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The one other thing I wanted to add that's relevant to both of your questions is that over the last few years, as we've started to move in this direction as we're writing curriculum, we've already been sort of like front-loading professional development for the teachers. So they reference the fact that they've seen this from other different presenters. So a lot of this has already been creeping into our instructional practice because they've, as we said, we sort of was offering some of this professional development.
Mr. Ballard?
The first definition of risk you gave was sort of innocuous. You know, it's a risk of failure. But how is this going to be communicated to the students as that alone and not, say, risky topics? I can see a goth adventure novel of a zombie attack on Emmaus High School, and in these days, that kind of thing might not be a wise risk to take. So how are we going to communicate the level or type of risk we're talking about students taking so that they understand it's risk of extending themselves beyond their immediate capabilities, but they may learn something from it?
You want to speak to that?
I think it's risk in trying new things, not necessarily content driven, but for example, you know, something that's very popular right now are novels in verse. So they look like poetry, but it's a complete book, it's a novel. So having a student, a kiddo told me this year, he doesn't read, he just doesn't do it. So I gave him this book and I said, why don't you try something that you've never tried before? You have nothing to lose. And he was reluctant, but he accepted that risk. So it can be something as small as just, you know, a different type of book. Could be a student that likes to write poetry, and maybe we say, well, maybe the next step would be a poetry slam, where you're actually orally performing your poetry in public. So it's more the risk-taking and their work a step further, rather than, like, risky material. We're always there to keep a monitor on that.
Okay.
That's our job.
Dr. Levinson?
So you've touched on a little bit of this already, but do you foresee challenges with assessment, to seeing how the students are going to do with the new curriculum? Do you follow the question?
So I think are you talking about like what classroom assessments will look like?
Yeah, and then making sure that they're responding to that.
Sure.
Versus the old curriculum.
So I'm going to define two very education terms real quick. So formative assessment, which is the kind of assessment that teachers use that don't go in the grade book. They're like quick checks for understanding. And then summative assessments, which are more formal assessments that do end up in the grade book. So I would say that we talk about two different types of assessment, and that formative assessment, those are things that are sort of like, if you can picture a teacher with a clipboard or walking around with their iPad while students are reading or writing, and they're checking in with students based on the progress that they're making on their work. That kind of assessment is what drives their day-to-day interactions with kids and planning future lessons. And then the more summative assessments, we're working on, again, aligning those summative assessments to ensuring that we're looking for the skills that we had set out to see our students demonstrate mastery over. And so that has taken a little bit of revision. So many of our assessments have been revised. In fact, teachers are working today on revising rubrics for writing, again, to align more to those.
Yeah, I suspected there would have to be some changes with.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith? I had a couple quick questions, more about the process of revising the curriculum rather than specifically the curriculum itself. As we know, there's the curriculum, then there's the programs that go along with the curriculum. Have we started exploring possible programs that are going to fit this curriculum at this point, so it's just strictly the curriculum?
There is not a, well, let me back up. So with our sixth grade reading and writing, the workshop model is being supported by, not sixth grade, I'm sorry, our middle school reading and writing is being supported by the Lucy Calkins writing program materials. So in our middle level, at our high school level, we are not looking to adopt a formal program. The curriculum is the curriculum that was written by the teachers and the teaching and learning that go along with it.
Okay, so the second part of that question, the revision that we're talking about, we've actually had several revisions of curriculum over the last couple of years. Is this due in part to a response to a need that you're seeing, or is this a part of a more cyclical, regular revision cycle that we're starting to look at now?
Yeah, it's more about cyclical. I don't want to quote the exact date, but I think it's been over 10 years since our, 2008 was the last time our secondary English curriculums had been touched. So it was time to breathe some life into them.
So that's why I asked. I didn't want to wait another 10 years before we're taking a look at what we're going to be doing now. If we're doing it regularly, that's always a preferred course of action. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Champagne?
Yes. When you talk about the highlights of the new curriculum, how are you differentiating this between the kids that are in CP, honors, and AP? Because there's a whole range of kids in the school. Some of them are college-bound, some of them are not, some of them have other interests. So how does this work to ensure that no matter where you fit, do they have the requisite skills that they're going to need to go on to the next step? Because I'm not sure I hear that at any of this.
Yeah, I'm just going to, on the very first slide that I had spoken about, where the differentiation by track, so that's really where that differentiation fits in. So a student in a GP class will be presented with a different level, different complexity of text than a student in a CP or honors level course. So the type of text would be the first thing. The second thing then would be the expectations for their actual writing assignments. So again, a student in a CP track, again, will be asked to engage with a different level of expectation as far as even just how many different texts they might be comparing in an analysis. The length of, even just the length of the paper or the types of citations they're expected to use would be different in a CP or an honors course than we would present to our GP students.
And do you see that as sufficient so that when they do decide to do the next, because you're looking at this as a profile of a graduate. So I'm looking at a kid who may not want to go on to secondary, post-secondary schooling. Is the skill set that they're going to walk out of the high school with going to get them where they need to be in whatever, path they choose? I mean, I'm thinking of the kids up at LCTI or the kids that are just not interested in going beyond.
I teach the GP inclusion class that is half LCTI, so that's always in the back of our minds, and, you know, the text complexity and the level of writing. But for example, a narrative writing piece is a big chunk of the first marking period. For my college prep class, they wrote the college essay, the narrative of a personal experience, and we looked at the common application prompts, and we followed that next step if you're going to college. In the GP course, we looked at when you're filling out a job application and they ask you to write a personal statement. How would you do that? To take that same skill, but make it applicable for the different avenues in which they're going. You know, we say all the time, they're not going to be reading Macbeth next year, but they definitely will get complicated text on how something works or what their boss expects them to do. So we really try to hone in that it's the skill of looking at those tougher documents and getting down to what you need.
Okay. And then just one other question on when you say success, you know, you're using the Keystone exams, and I'm struggling with why that's there in a not so much, you know, that it's obviously state mandated, but we've gone to a point where Keystones, you know, and this, at least for the near term, are not going to be, you know, part of the graduation criteria. I would also have thought you would want to have something like the SAT or the ACT outcomes, because, I mean, you've got, you know, a range, again, of kids, and, you know, the kids that are moving on to, let's say, college level work, that would seem to be a better indicator of whether or not, you know, those kids are prepared for that next level of rigor. And so I was surprised that I didn't see that there.
Well, I think we were thinking more holistically in that all students will take the Keystone, whereas there are only particular groups that will take those other tests, but absolutely they're taken into consideration as markers.
And then student interest and feedback, I guess I don't understand how that's a measure of success.
Oh, I can answer that.
Interest in writing.
What?
Interest in reading and writing.
I think that just, again, we're really looking, well, first of all, I do think that we're here to serve the students, so asking for their opinion about their course, I think, is very important. And then the other piece of it is, you know, we can do a better job ourselves if we understand what students like or dislike about their course. It's just good feedback for us.
I agree with the feedback, but I don't know how that's a measure of success.
Well, you know, if they're sharing things like, I really liked how you allowed me to write my college essay in class, that was really helpful, and I feel that, you know, that was a valuable piece of my 12th grade year. That's good feedback for us to know, okay, that's something that we want to make sure that we continue to offer to students.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Ms. Bowman.
I actually think the student feedback could be incredibly helpful in this day and age where kids increasingly don't want to read books, and you're all in the business of making or helping children to love reading books. That as you get that feedback, you'll learn what's working and what's not, in terms of trying to instill that love when you have a lot of forces working against you in society. So as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, that's an awesome thing, like trying to figure out how to, I did have a question about when you brought up the SATs. I'm assuming that's why we have word wealth. I'm just always flummoxed by why this book from 1973 is still a thing. My son learned the word dictaphone last week.
So I am very excited to share with you that that book is no longer included in our instructional practice. So we're really looking to find what we would say context-relevant vocabulary words, so books or words that kids are going to encounter in the books that they're reading, and again, that they would then include in their personal communication, whether written or orally.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm speaking too soon because there's so many presentations to come, but I'm always in favor of ways that we can emphasize learning over testing and grading. And it sounds like, at least on the surface, that this is definitely a step in the right direction, a way to emphasize that we want students to love writing, love reading, love talking about writing and reading. And assuming it accomplishes that goal, I'm definitely in favor of this.
That is our goal.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much for the presentation. Yes, but wait.
Okay, so I am going to now introduce the Secondary Social Studies Committee. And with us this evening is Marlo Cunningham. Marlo is our middle school department chair, and she teaches 8th grade social studies. Scott Ketchum, who teaches 8th grade social studies. Michael Facciano was unable to be with us tonight, so we miss him, but he was part of the process. Melissa Moxley, who is our high school department chair and also an American Studies 2 teacher, and Michael Carolla, who is an American Studies 1 teacher at the high school. And I'm going to turn it over to our teachers.
Good evening. So I'm here to talk to you about what's going to remain the same for middle level social studies. And I am going to clarify some of the language up there. So one piece that is going to stay the same is what we call our C3 framework. And just to clarify what that means, the 3 C's stand for college, career, and civics education. And it's all about preparing students with these standards through social studies for the real world. So we have been using that, although it's been many years since we've revised our curriculum, we have been instilling that in our classroom. So that has been in place already, and we're going to continue to use that. Again, along with that, our current curriculum in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade all ties into current events. So whether it be an event happening in the real world, real time, or something that relates in the relatively recent past, we try to tie it into the curriculum so that it has real world relevancy for these kids. We are also going to be continuing with the critical thinking skills. Again, coming back to that piece, the portrait of a graduate, that's really our focus. Getting these kids able to be able to decipher media, for example, and being able to read a newspaper article and understand, is there bias present in this? How do we identify if this is a reliable source? And really give them those essential critical thinking skills beyond just who was the general in this battle, really teaching them to be able to decipher text, both historical as well as relating to the media. And our content is going to generally remain the same. So our 6th grade is still going to be ancient history, our 7th grade will still be Middle Ages, and more of a world cultures, and our 8th grade will be more early American history, civics. It's the skills that will change slightly. And with that, I'll pass it over to Scott.
Thanks, Michael. So what are highlights from the new curriculum that we're speaking of? One that would be inquiry-based. Inquiry-based meaning students developing questioning skills that they're hungry to answer and learn how to be able to answer, researching the topics, using class time to do so, having students present what they've learned, and then asking to reflect on what worked about the process and what didn't, and those essential life skills. 2, being learning-centered. The personalization of work related to the social sciences is quite an important skill for those students to learn as well, through project-based learning and great one-on-one work with a teacher as a facilitator and getting feedback that's essential to move forward in the civic society. 3, connecting the content to real world and beyond schools. An example of that might be taking Columbus Day, the holiday today, and some people are calling it Indigenous Peoples Day, and analyzing that, and taking diffusion and immigration and the terms and relating it to U.S.-Mexico border policy. And 4th, encouraging students to be global citizens through community initiatives, responsibilities as a U.S. citizen through our 8th grade curriculum study, and in 7th grade, viewing of world cultures, which is a great addition to what I think in this stage of the new curriculum that we're doing, and taking it to a global perspective in that realm.
So what will success look like? Speaking specifically for the 8th grade, before they go on to the high school, we've created, and we're continually revising, a citizenship exam. It's much like a civics exam, basically to make sure that our students are understanding the basics of our government. Simple things like, what are the 3 branches of government? Things that we want our students to know and have a general foundation of before they go on to the high school and continue to build upon the foundations we set in 8th grade. Another gauge of success is engagement in school and local community. We provide various projects that incorporate the real world and the outside community. And those projects, we gauge their learning and understanding beyond just a simple multiple choice test. Do you understand, how this applies? For example, who can you contact as a representative if you need to bring about change in your society? And so that engagement through various projects is one of our ways to measure success.
Thirdly, on that, we can talk about achievement on course performance, task, and writing assignments. Some of the opportunities that you would have there would be real-life scenarios or mock scenarios like a mock trial, or creating your own country before learning how a country is created and how that process is initiated, and just creating a creative environment through the curriculum. And lastly, utilizing problem solving and enhanced research skills. And I really feel like this really hits the nail on the head in terms of what we want in our vision and mission statements on being collaborative, being problem solvers, and taking source evaluation, and not only evaluating it, analyzing it, but then presenting it and bringing it out to a real world context. And that's the middle school portion.
So I'm going to speak a little bit about the high school social studies changes. So first, what is not changing? We are still focusing primarily on teaching students to be good citizens, and that is really woven throughout all of our courses at all of the different levels. We are still maintaining the strong pillars of social studies education, which would be civics, economics, and of course, history. We are still continuing a skills-based instruction. So as opposed to rote memorization and regurgitation and trivia, we're focusing more on skills of analysis and interpretation and application. We continue to make connections to current events, which really enhances the relevancy to students' lives. And we're also focusing on content, but we're shifting things around so that we can ensure that we're really up to date. We also have not updated our curriculum since 2005, so a lot of things have happened in the last almost 20 years, so 15 years. So we need to make sure that we include those so that students can really connect those things to what's happening today as well as when they leave us in the future.
As Melissa said, one of the things we want to focus on specifically are the transferable skills that our students are going to be taking from one course to another in high school, regardless of level that they're in, but also, more importantly, when they graduate from East Penn. If you look at that mission statement, what we want them to be able to do is communicate with one another, to collaborate, to think critically, and that's regardless of level, that's regardless of course. And if they're able to do those things, along with other soft skills like flexibility, adaptation, organization, using technology less for games and more so for presentation and research skills. Those are things that we want them to be able to take away. And within our curriculum specifically, we do a lot of analysis of primary sources and secondary sources. As Marlo mentioned, we're looking at credibility of sources as well as a critical skill in today's world. Development of reading comprehension, and again, that's that difficulty level with the text, depending on the level that the student is in, is going to come into play, but we still want all those students to come away with those skills regardless of what course they're taking. So again, transferable skills being a big shift, and that's something we're currently doing, but we're going to continue to do it, and as I've heard echoed with all my colleagues, it's more of a student-focused approach to those things. The second piece is a big focus on big ideas and relevance. We want them to be able to make connections with the world around them and their nation, and what are they pulling from the content that is, they're going to be able to make connections from unit to unit and course to course, and they're going to remember long-term. And so it's it's less of a focus on the historical trivia and the minutia, and more what is the big picture. And that's the last piece, is we want them to be able to take away that big picture and connect to the world around them so that they can be leaders in their community and they can get actively involved in their community, in their school.
So lastly, how will we know that we are successful? We want to ensure that students are curious about current events as well as historical events, and that can be through class discussion, through whether it be formal or informal debates and student engagement in the classroom. There are obvious achievement on performance tasks. We've moved towards a lot of common assessments. So, for example, every American Studies 2 student will read the I Have a Dream speech, and then it's just leveled accordingly for GP, college prep, and honors. And so we can, as teachers of all sophomores or all freshmen, gauge the success of students and our delivery of that curriculum. We also have a wide variety of social studies related clubs. We have History Day, Young Republicans, Young Democrats, Mock Trial, and Model UN. Sorry, I knew I was missing one. So those types of extracurricular involvement really signals students' passion for this curriculum, how we can engage them as citizens. And then finally, we're really lucky to have a wide variety of AP and dual enrollment opportunities for students. And so when they choose those things above and beyond their on-level classes, that really shows their interest and our success. So that's a lot that just got thrown at you. Can I answer any questions?
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, first, I was remiss in not saying this earlier. I do want to thank you all for sharing your expertise with us. It's certainly never easy to come in front of the board, so I certainly recognize that, and thank you for your time tonight. The question that I had, and it may be a very multifaceted question, maybe there's not an easy answer to it, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. There's a lot of good things to take away from the presentation here in social studies, but in some of the comments that you shared with us, it got me thinking that a lot of the hot button topics, so to speak, that tend to cause some debate in classrooms tends to settle in social studies. You're not really having a whole lot of debate over the Pythagorean theorem. So you had mentioned a few things like examining bias, bringing in some more critical thinking skills. We also touched on topics that are current right now, like Columbus Day versus Indigenous Peoples Day, or the Mexican border policy. So current events are always part of social studies. So I guess my question is, with these types of hot button topics that could cause some debate, and our teachers bringing in their own personal feelings to the classroom, not that they are presenting them to our kids, but with the shift in curriculum from the trivia, as you said, to a more inquiry-based approach, how do you see those hot button topics being handled? Is it going to be handled any differently? What would that very specific and very small piece of what you do, how would that change from previously until now?
So that's a great question. That's something that we've actually spoken about in our department meetings. We have seen that there's been a bit of a shying away from some hot button topics because they do tend to cause a lot of debate in the classroom, but that's not always good. Sometimes we need to focus on things where people have a difference of opinion, and that's okay, and we can talk about that, and we can research reliable sources and get to kind of the facts-based discussion in a civil manner within the classroom. So I know that at the high school, we've really focused on that, and I think probably at the middle school as well. And something that we as teachers are really trying to focus on showing and modeling for our students how you can talk about things that might be controversial in a way that's mature and respectful.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Munson?
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask a broader and more simple form of that question. And it seems to sort of transcend just the middle school or just the high school, but how do you all as teachers and educators think about how you stage the development of student understanding of the difference between opinion and fact in a context in which right, there's very, very active and strong pressures from particularly outside the district to confuse things.
You want to jump in? Okay.
Well, I wanted to address that. I love that question because that is something that we're actually addressing even as far down as, like, I was having discussions with third grade teachers today about that very same thing, and it really comes back to directing students to learning about credible sources, where they gather their information, how they can fact check information, and then, as Melissa touched on, making sure that then kids know how to appropriately then share their new opinions that they've gained from the information that they've gathered, how they can share that in a civil and productive way. So that is something that through professional conversations, department meetings, we are sharing different kind of resources that approach those kind of topics, and it's actually a topic of future professional development that's forthcoming within the departments.
Is it the experience of the social studies faculty at both the middle, I'm thinking particularly of the high school level, that there has been a growth in the number of students who are challenged by this distinction, or is that something that is more problematic in the larger community than it actually is in the classroom?
Okay, I'm just going to speak because I personally, from my own experience in the real world, I see it honestly as more of an issue with adults. I feel like sometimes our kids are more tech savvy than we are, in that they can identify sometimes, oh, that's a blogger. That's just a blogger's opinion. That's not a news source. And so I love that, because I will go on my own personal social media site and see a grown-up posting something and thinking that it's absolutely factual. So, for example, at the middle school, one thing that we just did today during our professional development is I sat down with the head of the library department the other week, and we curated a Padlet. If you don't know what that is, it's basically like an online poster board where you can put Post-its of good sources. And so she actually helped me out and created links to different sites that evaluate like different political facts. So after the debate, we can have our kids go on and this site fact checks so you can tell those things. It also included a site that's kind of an infographic to show where did you find your news source. And this infographic is bipartisan, and it kind of shows, okay, this tends to lean a little more to the left, this one leans a little bit more to the right. And so we really focus and teach our kids, it's okay to read something that's slightly more biased, but then what you need to do is understand that's bias. We need to also look at the other side to be able to compare and contrast. And so I think, like, I was impressed. We did some training today. I used it with my kids the other week, and I think they are so tech savvy already with sources on the internet that when we show this to them and really show them that you can figure it out, just don't immediately jump to the assumption that that is fact. Like, take a second, breathe. How do we determine a reliable source? And so through these sources, collaborating, I know today we worked together through the departments a little bit to work on this, and the kids, they do a great job with it, so they're growing. That's all.
Great. I just have one more substantive comment, which sounds snarky, but actually it's not at all. I hope you take it seriously, but I actually think that for today's students, Martin Luther King's letter from Birmingham jail would be a far more apt and important document for them to know than the I Have a Dream speech.
We actually do also, I Have a Dream came off the top of my head, but we do use that one, and the kids are actually moved by it tremendously, so it's very.
Mr. Jankowski.
I want to be careful with what I say because my wife's a high school American history teacher, but and hopefully she's not watching. I mean, I think these are very important and practical skills, developmental skills for students, particularly with the ease and availability of information today. But one of the questions I have is, you know, obviously, the ideal program starts from the 6th grade and you build going forward through high school. How are you going to phase this and your measurement and assessment of the student's success where you have, you know, next year a 9th grader who hasn't had that 6th through 8th grade you know, foundation to grow on, or a sophomore or junior versus that 6th grader or 7th grader who has the benefit of having had this foundation and growth through what what this curriculum is going to establish.
So thank you for that. What's really nice about the social studies is that unlike something like math or science, you don't always necessarily need that foundation because we weave so many aspects of civics and history and economics in. For example, even teaching American history, I go over the articles of the Constitution because maybe they haven't had it, and it's important when we discuss the war powers of Congress versus the war powers of the president, say in the Vietnam War, that they understand that. So we have the ability really to kind of continually do that, and even if they have gotten that foundation, that we can reinforce it throughout all of the high school or later middle school years.
Will there be different expectations for the different levels of students until you have that 6th grade class go all the way through?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can really target students individually from where they are and then meet them to that expectation. So the other thing that's nice is spreading out the time periods a little bit more gives me an opportunity to go, okay, well, you guys you should have learned about this, but maybe you don't have a strong grasp of it. So I'm going to take some of you and we're going to talk about what the Supreme Court does and how that has influenced American history before we talk about, say, Brown versus the Board of Education. So we have that opportunity and we have the time built in that we can really make adjustments year to year, class to class. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. And that's what's nice about the content, but also the new curriculum allows us to do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Levinson. So, with curriculum changes in both English and social studies, did you look for opportunities to create any synergies between the two?
I think that's something that we would all love to do. Okay, go ahead, I'll turn it.
So that was something, it was very interesting having sat in the room with every single group that was writing their curriculum, because I was able to then be this common thread that then said, it's interesting that you're talking about, inclusion, or you're talking about perseverance, because that was what also came up in our social studies department. And so very naturally, without my having to push, there are very, very common themes that have emerged in both of our main humanities courses. So as we move into the teaching and learning phase, absolutely, there's going to be opportunities for, sort of a crossover. In addition, our social studies department has really committed to the art of writing like a historian and reading like a historian. So again, there's going to be clear connections then between the work that's being done in our English courses and then also being done in our social studies classes.
Okay. And then one more specific question I had. So obviously a lot of time is spent on looking at the federal governmental structure. To what extent do we go down to the local level? And has that been enhanced?
So I'll just give you an example of one of my projects, and I will forewarn you in case you ever get an email from one of my students. Just letting you know, they research you. So one of the projects that we do in my 8th grade class, and several of the other 8th grade teachers do as well, involves kids looking at issues, and they have to identify a real world issue. And it could be anything from bullying to texting and driving. And then part of my curriculum where I have to teach the levels of government and the branches of government and what is representative government. So not only am I teaching that, but I'm actually saying, okay, you picked bullying as your issue. You've identified that that might be a problem in the East Penn School District. Who are your elected representatives that you would have to contact? And then we spend time going on the East Penn School District website, pulling up all of your names and looking at it and saying, oh, okay, these are the people that we would have to contact if we wanted to write a policy to be enacted in the schools. And so for that, we're not just looking at the federal government. We break it down so that kids are looking at the local and school level, they're looking at the state level, and the federal, depending on what issue they have identified, but it allows us to not just teach the civics education, but actually teach them how to be a citizen, how, without running for government, how can you actually enact change and bring about changes at the various levels. So that's just one example of how it's not just listing the federal government, but also getting, real grassroots with the lower levels.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Ballard?
Well, as an engineer, I do have a lot of appreciation for science and math, but I also, as a school board member, have a lot of interest in social studies. Before it became social studies, when the first schools were actually invented, the main purpose of schools was to civilize their students. You've heard of finishing schools and things like that were popular as far back as a couple hundred years ago, and they were designed to bring students into the world with some understanding of both civics, how their government ran, and civility as to how to maintain civil discourse when you're talking about rancorous things like perhaps going to war, or whether or not the king should be deposed, or nowadays whether we should impeach someone or not. There's a lot of this going on today that doesn't seem to have a whole lot of civility behind it. So I'm curious as to how you integrate the civics portion, which is fairly, if you will, cut and dried. You know, we have 3 branches of government and so forth, and it's not something that is subject to much interpretation. But when you're talking about civil discourse and civility in your classrooms, how do you integrate that with the social studies curriculum of today?
I would say that it starts with a lot of modeling. So as we sort of addressed previously, the idea, the behaviors that are necessary in order to be a civil engaged citizen, you need to be able to be an effective researcher and find your information. And then as some of my fellow colleagues back here had mentioned, also then being able to model for students how they then can engage in an effective conversation with others regarding that content that they have now discovered. So a lot of modeling and a lot of effective research.
Have you ever discussed the technique of speaking with facts?
I'm not sure if I know if that's like a capital speaking with facts.
Yeah, there is
the program
whole approach to civil discourse.
Go ahead.
So in terms of civil discourse and political debate, so my background before teaching was I actually worked in Washington, D.C. for about 4.5 years. And not the 4.5 years previously to right now. So civil discourse in my 20 years has eroded in many ways, shapes, and forms. However, the opportunity, my reason of leaving Washington, because I didn't feel like I could get something done there, I feel like I can get more done with a 12, 13, and 14-year-old student here than I can with a politician that's been there for 30 years. And that's the honest truth of the matter. In terms of that, how do we do that? Well, we do our research, we do our data, we try to be objective and look out for bias on each end, and present facts. So not only do you present them, but in some cases you can defend them. So, and have a class debate, but do it under the rules of civil debate codes and how they do that, and then use debates from the 60s versus now. We have the Kennedy-Nixon debates, and we can tie it into 2016 and show and compare and contrast how that goes. And with one-to-one in our technologies that we have available thanks to the district and where we are, we have a better opportunity to show that and describe that to students now than ever before.
Okay. Off on another of my favorite topics, the state legislature. Are you aware that there is a bill floating around in the education committees of the Senate and the House that would require all high school students to take and pass the U.S. citizenship test, 100 questions, and get a passing grade on that? And what is your feeling about the education we're providing our students, and would they be able to pass that test?
So the bill specifically states that students need to be able to take a citizenship test. So that is why we now have the citizenship test as part of our 8th grade requirement. So as soon as that bill kind of came floated by at that time, Mrs. Whitman was in the curriculum office. So she integrated the citizenship test into our 8th grade end of year process. Yep.
So we feel we can produce students who will pass that test.
Our students have been passing the test.
Our 8th graders are passing it.
Winning.
Mr. Byrd.
Yes, you mentioned global citizenship, making our students global citizens. And you also introduced world cultures. How do you implement world cultures or introduce our students to world cultures and make them understand of how that's important?
I'll take that from the middle school perspective because I actually teach 7th and 8th grade, so I will be part of that new curriculum. Previously, our old curriculum, the 2005 model, talked more about European history and went into a great deal about European history. The new curriculum really transforms into a world survey of not only cultures from European, the Western European worlds, but Asia, Africa, the early Americas, Europe, the Indian subcontinent, and I don't think I'm missing anything. But we've expanded on that and having that world culture scale because our classrooms are different than 2005 in terms of not only the students, the technology, and whatnot, but also our demographics here district-wide too. So that expansion of the culture initiative from the 7th grade perspective and 6th grade when we do ancient history and ancient cultures is very important, and it's very much in an expanded form in the 6th and 7th grade middle school curriculum.
And just to piggyback on that, at the high school level, we found when we looked at our old curriculum that we were really repeating a lot of the same things from American 2 to World, which they get their junior year. Students were learning both world wars twice. So what we did was we eliminated all of that duplicates, and we were able then to focus, kind of spread it out, and we were really missing a lot of the modern world parts of the curriculum, so that's what we were able to add in. So things like modern Asia and the modern Middle East, things that are really complicated and very much in the lives of students today that we now have more time to focus on and allow students to learn a lot more about the world around them.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a question that came up, I think, in the middle school portion of both presentations, the mention of in-class learning was mentioned a lot. And are we to assume that there will be less out of class? Or I wasn't sure what that emphasis was. Like, I think it was like there'll be these in-class assignments that students will be working on, the teachers will be checking them, but does that mean, how does that affect homework?
Yeah, so I can't speak necessarily to day-to-day homework assignments because to some extent day-to-day homework is to the discretion of the teacher based on what the needs are of their students in their classroom. But ultimately what we were getting at was we previously had models where a lot or a substantial amount of reading and writing or project doing was happening at home, and then the kids just sort of came in and submitted the project or submitted the writing. The concept behind the workshop model specifically, and then a few of the teachers up here mentioned this idea of like more of a project-based approach, is that work is done in the classroom with the teacher alongside. Now that's not going to be said that they didn't finish something and they might need to finish the assignment at home, or like I've given you the coaching during the school day and now I want you to try it independently at home. That might still happen, but it's just that's teacher by the side and providing that sort of direct feedback would happen in the classroom.
Okay, all right, great. I think that's the only question I had. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne.
Just one of the things that my son found most useful was the DBQ approach. I hope that's not being lost in all of this.
Actually, we're really expanding that. A lot of our DBQ assessments were done with the higher level students, and what we found is that it is such a valuable way to get students to understand history and primary sources that we're able to kind of take those primary sources and then maybe break it down to smaller pieces for some of the lower level and walk them through the process. So there's some scaffolding that eventually then they leave us and they're better able to engage in that DBQ process. So it's just kind of scaled according to students' ability, but we've actually expanded it with this new curriculum.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, any other questions? Thank you for the presentation.
With DBQs.
Good evening. I'm joined tonight by Mr. John Dietrich, who's the Department Chair of the Business and Computer Applications Department, and Mr. Jason Geist, who's here to represent the Technology Education Department. And we have 4 courses to propose to you. These are all new courses, so there's no revisions. These are all new courses. And the first one that I would like to talk about is the mobile apps course. So last April, we proposed a revised 6 through 8 curriculum for the Business and Computers Department. And one of the pieces to that was in grade 8, they were going to be getting an introduction to creating basic apps. So we wanted to have an opportunity for those students to pursue that interest once they got up to high school. So next year, we're hoping to offer this mobile apps course to allow those students to pursue that interest. Just to take one step back, next year at this time, we are hoping to propose district-wide revisions, department-wide revisions for computers and business. This one is going to be 1 year out ahead just because of the revisions that were made last year. So to clear that up, we just want to have an opportunity for those students to pursue that if it is there. So we currently have 8th graders who are doing some very basic app creation. If we're offering this next year, it would allow them to do that as early as a 9th grader. So this is a half-year elective course within the Business and Computer Department. So what they would be doing in the mobile apps course, some different things. They'd be making prototypes of apps. They would be personalizing existing apps. So it's not just following recipes and doing what the textbook would tell them. They would be taking an existing apps and then personalizing it, adding their own twist to it. And then they would also be having the opportunity to develop a complete app on their own, based on their own interests. So I don't think I need to tell you this, but with the apps becoming so important right now, this is a really interesting opportunity to give our students an opportunity to work more with the technology that's at their fingertips. With apps, we rely on it so much nowadays with the phone, so this would be a really good opportunity for those students. So I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Dietrich right now, who will talk more about what success would look like in this class.
Thank you. This is a really unique opportunity for us. We haven't revised or added things to our curriculum since about 2008. So technology changes a lot, business practices changed a lot over that time, and we're really, when the middle level decided to make these changes to their curriculum, it really provided us with a great opportunity to make additional changes to ours immediately. Like many of our courses, we have tangible things that kids can create in the computer, especially in the computer area of our department, where they're able to produce products that are authentic by nature. So they're going to see success through the process in final products. Because of the nature of the products and projects that they're completing, they'll be critically thinking, solving problems to fix apps and improve or personalize existing apps. They're going to look for ways to create apps to help in education, location awareness, high-tech, and then web-enabled apps as well. So we are trying to provide them with a good variety of things that they can touch on to see if there's an interest further down the road than these basic things that they've done in 8th grade then to 9th grade, to provide them with some more exposure to different technologies that we haven't offered in the past.
As far as budget implications, the $2,200 would be spent on 10 different Android tablets that would allow the students to actually test the app that they create. So we want to give them that opportunity. If they're going to make an app, they're going to make a product, to be able to see what it really looks like. I also do want to add that I did read recently that if you're wondering why Android, the MIT App Inventor 2 that we would be looking to use next year, they are in beta right now with iOS, so there would be an opportunity to maybe pursue apps with the iOS system as well. So this doesn't necessarily mean that it's strictly going to be Android in the future. We would have hopefully some flexibility. Are there any questions about the mobile apps course?
Mr. Ballard?
On what platform will you be running the SDK for the development of these apps?
We'd be using the Android platform to start, but like Mr. Mahalik said, they are beta testing right now to try to incorporate iOS as well.
Well, I understand what languages you're trying to program in, but the SDK itself operates under either it operates under a different system usually than Android. It's usually a Windows-based SDK or a Linux-based SDK, system development kit. And I'm wondering what, platform you'll be running that on.
To be completely honest, I don't know. That's something we can certainly follow up with you about.
Mr. Jankowski?
Will the student, a ninth grader, have to have taken the eighth grade course as a prerequisite to take ninth grade?
Yes, and all the eighth graders do go through that course. Yeah, it's not an elective at eighth grade. So
ninth grade's an elective.
The ninth grade would be elective, yes.
And then how are they graded? For example, if you have a student that, might have, done everything that they thought was correct, but the app doesn't operate successfully, or they're not able to get to function. I mean, how are you, assessing?
Yeah, those are all, that's a great question. Those are all conversations that we're going to have very soon. So we're actually going to go on some site visits to see how they're doing in other schools, and we are going to learn from them. Whitehall has a mobile apps course, and so does Quakertown. So that is going to be one of the questions that we have. How does the grading look? But I think that it would be very similar to how a lot of other projects are graded in other classes, where it's not just always going to be the final product, more of the process as well leading up to that point.
Thanks.
Yep.
Dr. Munson?
Yeah, I have my question actually has to do with staffing. Someone has to teach this. What are they teaching now that they will no longer teach? Like, how will it fit into the other offerings?
We're not sure yet, because we're not certain what type of interest there's going to be from students. Obviously, every year when we go through enrollment process, we have to make decisions about what classes to teach and what classes not to teach. Usually with what we've had in years past, we've always been able to accommodate all student requests. So we are expecting some changes in interest, and we're hoping that those changes in interest would coincide with, our staffing, without having to remove other things that, we might have taught in the past. Okay.
Mr. Byrd?
What you said in the eighth grade is a mandatory and it's elective after that, am I right or wrong?
Yeah, so all of the students, they go through trimesters in eighth grade, actually 6th through 8th grade, and they all have in their related arts and their exploratory programs, they will go through a trimester of computers and business applications, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
So being mandatory, you can basically calculate what staff you'll need for the 8th grade. Just the upper grades is where you have to look at what you have to do.
Correct. It's already part of the existing middle school program. And one other thing to add too is, this is a year out ahead of the rest of the revisions in the department. So this would be a good opportunity to see what the interest is like a year ahead of everything else. Because maybe there is, if there's a lot of interest, maybe we do take a look at how is this going to affect the other offerings that we have historically had. It would just be, some good information to have going into the revision. Does that answer your question?
One other question. I know you're offering this course mobile app. What is the end result as a person gets out of high school? Is it to develop more creativity or more thinking? What is a real goal for teaching this course?
Yeah, that was my understanding. So I don't have a background in creating mobile apps by any means. When we were going through the writing process, I did see a lot of opportunities for creativity. It's not just following a script and following a recipe in a textbook and then making the app that the textbook wants you to make. It's having an opportunity to recognize that there might be a potential need in our local community, maybe a business opportunity, but there's potentially a need for students then to pursue that need and create an app that would address that need. So there's many different opportunities that students can take with that. It could be more of a business, or it could have something to do with forget business. Maybe it's making an app that would inform people historically about what the Lehigh Valley used to look like in certain places. So there's lots of opportunities. So I think creation is a big part of it, but also be able to critically think and problem solve. So one of the it's going to be a constant in this course is to the students will be posed with problems and basically figure out what went wrong here. So it's allowing them to do that problem solving.
Thank you.
Dr. Levinson.
So thinking a little bit bigger here, is there a potential for a student in this course to make something that can be marketable? And then if so, how would that be handled?
I think that would be fantastic if that was an outcome. I don't really know how that would be handled towards the end, but I would think any opportunity that we provide our students to make something that has an authentic use, I think that would be a tremendous thing. But that's certainly something that we can consider what happens in the end if this is something that really has the power to be something that's marketable.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Bowman?
I was just curious why it's a part of a year, or is it half a credit class versus a whole year, what the thinking is for that?
Yeah, I think the initial thinking is with a course in its first year, I think it's much more manageable, attainable to do it in a half year, get through that, and if the teachers go through it and, we can see that maybe this should be expanded to a full year, we can do that, but I think we feel pretty confident in these 4 units that it would be, and that taking up that half year. And also it just allows the students a little bit more flexibility with their schedules too, to offer it as a half year initially as compared to a full year course.
Okay, thank you for that. And you said you needed the Android tablets to test the apps, but is that what you'll be using to make them, or are they using their Chromebooks or something else?
Yeah, they would be able to use their Chromebooks to make the apps through MIT App Inventor for right now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You may need an IP attorney on staff.
Any other questions? Well, I'd just like to say I think this is a great idea for our class. I was thinking along the lines of Dr. Levinson with the democratization of software publishing now, that there could be opportunities there. And I think along the lines of transferable skills, the ability to analyze and present data is a great skill to have and can be used in multiple places. And I think this is having something show you something on your handheld device is an excellent opportunity to learn. So I appreciate it, and thank you for your presentation. Thank you. Oh, I have one more question, sorry.
I just want to point out, if you haven't been reading the news lately, that a couple of kids and their father down in Villanova have just put out an app called Squisher, which counts up the number of spotted lanternflies you squish. And there are boards and all of that other stuff, but they're also supplying the Department of Agriculture in Pennsylvania and New Jersey with data on how many bugs are being squished in what area.
And where.
And that is proving to have some scientific benefit. So these kind of apps can be something positive for the community, even developed in middle school and high school.
Thank you.
The next course that I would like to propose to you is called Home Maintenance and Materials Technology. This is another half-year elective course. This time it would be in the Technology Education Department. The highlights of this course would be to basically give the students an opportunity to learn the skills that they're going to need when they become homeowners. So as most of you probably experienced early on, that when you purchase your home, that's the biggest investment that you're going to make in your life. And so some of these students are going to go through that pretty quickly after leaving high school. And so we want to make sure that the students are prepared for such an investment, but also teach them more about maintenance versus repair. And so to teach these skills, we're going to do it through 4 units, and the 4 units would be electricity, plumbing, construction, and landscaping. And so you might be wondering about where are the tools and where's that going to fit in. So the students would learn how to use the different tools as they're needed. So for instance, they're going to learn how to use a miter saw when they might be working on trim for an interior door or window, something of that nature. So every tool is going to have an authentic application to it. So they're going to associate tools with why you would even use them. So this is going to be a course that is very much project-based. It's going to appeal to a lot of different learning styles. It's going to appeal to a lot of different students who want to know how to do things around the house. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for application, both while the kids are in high school, but then afterwards, lasting their whole lives. I know my dad's probably going to be disappointed in this, but this is a course I would have loved to have had and learned all these skills before I became a homeowner. So success is going to look like, number one, safety. That's going to be a major part of this course. The students learning how to properly use a lot of different tools throughout this course. They're going to demonstrate a lot of creativity in the form of problem solving. They're going to be given, that's part of being a homeowner, is you've got to solve problems. Something happens, well, how are you going to fix it? And then giving them an opportunity to pursue a final project at the end of the year, and that's something that we're still working on. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but giving them an opportunity to pursue a final project that would demonstrate their understanding and the acquisition of the skills along the way. So I think real life application in this course is the main appeal to this. The tech ed department budget would be able to cover any additional expenses, but they have all of the needed tools, the space, and the staffing to be able to run this course. So this would be very similar to mobile apps in that we're not sure exactly how popular this is going to be, but we do expect that there would be a lot of kids interested in this. One of the reasons that we did decide to put this course together was because of a course called Design to Build is no longer running, and so this was maybe a replacement to that. Design to Build became very much dependent on what the big project was. Design to Build class did a lot of fantastic projects in our community, and the teachers who ran that class and the students deserve a ton of credit, but it became very dependent upon what that big project was, and so the curriculum really, it was difficult to be able to teach that class not knowing what the actual, the final product was going to be. So with this course, it's going to be very much in control, and it's going to have the ability to give the kids an immediate application, in their personal lives at home. So are there any questions about the home maintenance materials course?
Ms. Bowman.
Not a question as much as it is a comment. I think this is a great class and I wish I could take it.
Audit. Any other questions? Thank you for the presentation.
All right, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jason Geist. He is one of our math teachers, but also one of our Project Lead the Way teachers. He is going to speak about the capstone course, which is the Engineering, Design, and Development course for Project Lead the Way.
Good evening. So we've been doing Project Lead the Way. This is our 4th year. Students start in one of two of the introductory classes, either Principles of Engineering or Introduction to Engineering Design. When they finish one of those courses, they move on to one of the secondary courses that we offer: Civil Engineering and Architecture, Computer Integrated Manufacturing, Environmental Sustainability, and Digital Electronics, Digital Electronics. So when they complete one of the secondary courses, they are able to move on to this capstone class. So in this capstone class, what they will be able to do is to take the knowledge that they learned in the previous courses that they took and design a project on their own. So if they take the engineering, they can do an engineering. If they take computer integrated manufacturing, they can do a robotics project. So basically what they're trying to do in this course is design and develop a solution by applying the engineering design process that they learned in their previous courses. It allows them to do project-based experiences. They're allowed to, or they're able to create something new, or they can innovate an existing product and try to make it better. This allows them to personalize their learning experience. So they'll be able to choose something that they want to do, very similar to what they were talking about with the English curriculum earlier in the evening. They'll be able to choose a project that applies to them, or something, if they talk to someone in the community, they can pick something that will make something better in their community moving forward. So where we will see success is, one, what they've been doing throughout while taking the Project Lead the Way courses is problem solving and creating new ideas and products. What we plan to do is we plan to do an annual spring showcase to demonstrate the value of the work. So what we would like to do is we'd like to have parents, community members coming in and seeing the projects that these students create, and they're able to show off their work, explain their work, and explain the process that they went to complete these projects. Other opportunities for the students who take this course, they can get college recognition. They can get credit depending on the institution. There are institutions that offer credit for completing this class, and there's also, we're hoping by creating relationships with local businesses that we can create business opportunities for these students through possible internships or future employment. The budget implications for this class, the expectation, because it is a licensed program through Project Lead the Way, we expect it to be a little over $4,300 for both materials and supplies in the first year. Any questions?
Dr. Munson.
Yeah, the $4,000 and change price tag, would that be a recurring charge, or is that something where it's an upfront cost and then you can run it in subsequent years for little or to no additional?
That'll be an upfront cost, and we should be able to run it to little or no charge. It will depend on the projects that the students choose from year to year. We, over the years that we've been running the program with the 3D printers and the things but if they're going to print, we're going to have to buy filament for those printers, but those costs will be able to be taken up by the usual tech ed budget.
And do I understand correctly, I mean, my understanding from the last couple times we've heard about Project Lead the Way courses is that, I mean, they're similar to AP courses in the sense that the curriculum is defined by this outside organization.
Yes, sir.
Not defined locally. Is that true of this? This class sounds much more, I have a hard time seeing how that works in a class like this.
The curriculum is designed by Project Lead the Way. So they guide them through the whole process of their project. So we start with the design process. They come up with a problem that they need to solve. They move through designing the project, the problem solving. If something goes wrong, they work back, they start over. So that the process of the course is taken over by Project Lead the Way. The project that they choose is on their own. That will change from group to group and year to year for the students.
And the $4,000 price tag is for instructional materials from Project Lead the Way?
That's mostly go ahead.
Is it technology?
My understanding is when you take a Project Lead the Way course, there's a list of materials that you need to teach that course. So for the first year, it's both materials and also some basic, some tools and instruments that are needed. So it's pretty much determined by Project Lead the Way what you need, but then there's also the ability to, well, you might have extra of this and you don't need to order everything that they tell you that you should get. Great. That make sense?
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Champagne?
Yeah, I think this is an excellent, way to kind of pull all this stuff together. Now, when I read the background out of this, they suggested this is for 12th graders. Is this going to be only for the 12th grade students, or is this going to be for anyone that's gone through the program to this point?
Yeah, this is a class for 12th graders specifically. This would be the capstone course, so they have to go through at least 2 other Project Lead the Way courses to get to this point.
Okay, so students who might have interest in doing something like this, even though they haven't gone through Project Lead the Way, are they precluded from doing this?
If they haven't taken that first IED or POE and then another course, then yes, they would not be able to take this.
So somebody that's an AP physics whiz or a computer science whiz, so why can't they take this?
So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a big part of this is that they're applying the engineering design thinking that they've learned in those other courses to get to this point. This is something that it's a capstone course. It's to basically put everything that they've learned in the Project Lead the Way courses, is to put that to use and apply that engineer design thinking in this opportunity.
Yeah, I guess I'm still struggling with that because a lot of these kids who are in those AP level courses probably have this process down as well as the kids that are in Project Lead the Way. And I would think that you would want to open this up to anybody that has the aptitude to take on something like this.
Yeah, I also, I would like to add, and Mrs. Whitman, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you're actually allowed by Project Lead the Way to take this course without having those prerequisites met. Is that right?
That's how it worked at Parkland.
So through the intro level course and then typically the secondary course is like highlighting something the kid's passionate about, which is why we've added all those secondary courses. But they have to have a command of inventor to be able to even draw up some of the things that they'll then be proposing and going through with in the process that Mr. Geis was speaking to. So it isn't like if you came in and you never had any background in inventor or POE or IED, it would be very difficult for a student to be able to complete that course. What you're asking for AP kids, there is a course that we currently don't have in our curriculum that's somewhat similar, but still not that like hands-on engineering. You really need those background courses to go through that. And so, I mean, that is the simple answer for Project Lead the Way. You can't go into EDD without having those baseline coursework.
So you said there is a course that
There is a course for AP that we don't have currently, and it's a capstone, like a research and seminar course, but I think, that's not what I think you're asking for when you're asking about, like, it exists, but it's that same idea of like an independent project course. And it's certainly something we can investigate, but it's something that we haven't added just for staffing reasons.
Yeah, I would think with I know that what my son went through at Lehigh, I mean, they always have a capstone project. I'm sure most other universities have capstone projects in the engineering curriculum, and kids that are, have an aptitude for robotics or computer science or other, science-based would welcome the opportunity to have a capstone type of.
Well, and often our students are in Project Lead the Way, also in AP Physics, are taking those like heavy science courses and heavy math courses. We see those parallels. Not always, but we do. So in course taking, like certainly being involved with Project Lead the Way doesn't preclude being involved in AP Physics C or
Well, I understand that, but I'm saying giving those kids that are not in Project Lead the Way the opportunity to have a capstone project, to do something of a similar kind of nature, if they are so inclined.
We could investigate the AP research course. We had a project for all kids. It was a graduation project, and it was a little difficult at times. So, I mean, I think like we, again, want to give that choice to kids, and we'll certainly investigate the other route.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Levinson?
Well, in a prior life, I taught capstone chemical engineering class at a collegiate level, so I can certainly appreciate just how wonderful an experience is going to be for the students in trying to pull all these things together. One of the things that I incorporated into my own courses was a strong presence of communication through writing and oral presentation and whatnot. Can you comment on what's incorporated in this particular curriculum?
So one of the many things that this course will encourage the students to do, one is collaboration with classmates, but also people in the community. But at the end of the course, part of the project is they need to present this material. So they create a very detailed presentation of the process and the final product and what they went through. They also, one of the things that they will work with is an engineering notebook to get through the experience that an engineer would go through. And then at the end, that engineering notebook would be evaluated by the instructor, and people from hopefully industry will come in and look through that. So they'll be able to communicate with people outside of the school also to share their experiences.
All right, thank you.
Any other, Mr. Jankowski.
It was only partially in jest when I referenced an IP attorney. To Dr. Levinson's point about the mobile apps and the marketability, and then with Project Lead the Way and students creating their own prototype, developing processes or projects, we're getting into potential copyright patent issues and ownership of these products. And one thing that you might want to look into when you're visiting these other schools is to see how they treat that, how they treat ownership of that. Are they using enough school materials and school tools and direction that the school owns that, or is it something we're going to be willing to allow the students to take on as their own? Are we going to support the students in any necessary filings to protect these inventions, these products? Are we going to? I mean, there's just a whole assortment of issues that come into play in that regard. So, I mean, that's something that I think needs to really be considered also when developing these programs.
Mr. Ballard?
Just to play off of that, it sounds like a great pro bono project for some of our lawyer members of the board.
Are there any lawyers here?
So noted.
Second.
I do happen to brag.
All in favor,
I happen to play in that area. So, yeah. I would be happy to give my participation, because I do practice in that area a little bit.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, Mr.
I have one comment. I think presentation pieces are very important. You can't sell your idea. It's not a good idea. And I really applaud you for pushing that. And we really need that. Thank you.
Anyone else? I also think this is a great class, and Appreciate that. I have a question about, are these group projects then, or are these individual projects, or is it one project for the whole class, or how does that?
They can be group or individual projects.
Okay, great. Yeah, this is a great idea. Thank you very much for your presentation.
And the last course is called Design and Development, some familiar terms. It's important to note that this one would be within the school presentation, which we're about to get to in a few minutes. So if you could keep that in the back of your mind. So this would be a course that would be part of that program. This is a course that is very similar to the one that Mr. Geis just presented about, but this would be on a level that would be more appropriate for incoming ninth graders. So this course is going to allow them to use design thinking, learn more about design thinking framework to solve problems and become better problem solvers. And so there's basically going to be 3 different types of problems that they're going to be solving in this course. The first one would be making an improvement to an existing problem, and that could be a variety of different types of problems. The second would be creating their own product or a prototype. And then the third problem that they would be faced with is a problem of their choice. So this would be an opportunity for kids who are maybe not necessarily in Project Lead the Way to get into design thinking and some problem solving at the freshman year. So this is going to be a very personalized experience. Same way that EDD could be group or could be solo projects, this one would have a little bit of the same feel to it. There's also a lot of potential for this to go in a lot of different directions, which is also pretty exciting. That's where the students are going to get to pick what they're really passionate about and pursue that to solve the problems that I've already outlined.
So, similar to EDD, the success for the students where they'll be seen is the work that they do and the thinking that they do through the design process to solve problems. So what we want to see in this course is students demonstrating creativity in the form of problem solving, but also creating new ideas and products or improving products. So again, like with EDD, we want to do an annual spring showcase to demonstrate the value of their work. We want students being able to communicate their work to other people, the community, family members, other students. So this gives the students a great opportunity to apply the design thinking in other courses and other situations. So by learning it in ninth grade, they'll be able to apply this into other courses that they will take throughout their high school career. Budget implications, there really are none. The high school tech ed department currently has all the needed tools, space, and staffing to be able to teach this course. The material costs will be able to be covered by the usual tech ed yearly budget. Any questions?
I had a quick question about this, and then I had a follow-up comment about the presentations in general. Do you want to do that now, or? My comment, or should I do, I'll wait for everybody to ask questions. The spring showcase I just saw up there, is that something that you are anticipating being open to the public? Something that could be incorporated as part of a showcase? And I don't know if kids could share some of their projects here as part of a board meeting or anything like that? Or?
Yeah, I was thinking, you're familiar with the art show. Those students get to display their incredible artwork. It would be fantastic to give the students in the EDD and the design development course a similar platform to showcase what they've done and be able to explain the process they took to get to that point.
And then I was going to yield if anybody had any other questions, but I wanted to talk about a comment about the presentation in general.
No, go.
So, Mr. Mahalik and Ms. Murphy, if I had to summarize all these presentations in one word, I would just say bravo. You can call yourselves distinguished or give yourselves a level 4 or whatever terminology you want to use, but I was completely blown away tonight by the curriculum revisions. I was very impressed. Just looking at a couple of the themes that I wanted to highlight on, I was impressed with the fact that whether it was the English and the social studies or the STEM, in all these presentations, it talked about where we want our kids to go. And it talked about how we as a district need to adjust to the needs of a learner in 2019. But the one piece I think I'm not sure if it was selling yourself short or just a piece that wasn't necessarily as strongly included as some of the other ones, is that, and one of the biggest theme for me was that in all of these, there's a defined preparation of our students for the unknown that is yet to come. We talked so much about what we want our students to be when they graduate, but part of it is in our vision right there, and it's preparing our kids for, yeah, they're going to be able to develop an app. But what's that going to translate to, 4 or 5 years, 10 years from now, when there's a technology out there that we haven't even thought about? What skills are they bringing with them? Soft skills, what are they bringing with them? And these types of curriculum revisions, I think, are going to put us light years beyond where we were yesterday. So I want to commend the both of you and your teams for that. It was a phenomenal presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on the curriculum? Right, thank you very much. Are we moving on to?
We're still good.
I think Mr. Jankowski had a...
No, it's all right.
Oh, I didn't see.
No,
sorry.
All right, now it's time to move on to some program presentations. The first one that I would like to propose to you is called the Student Intern Teacher Program. And I think the words on this slide are pretty important. It's inspiring the next generation of secondary educators. So we at Emmaus High School, we prepare students for a lot of careers that are known, but then, like Mr. Smith just mentioned, a lot of things that are unknown. But one of the things that maybe we could do a better job of is preparing our students, if they have an interest in secondary education, to pursue that interest. So the Student Intern Program would allow for next year our 12th grade students to have an opportunity to serve as an intern teacher. So they would be able to find out whether or not they would like to pursue secondary education before even getting into a college environment. So this is going to allow them to focus on teaching and learning, and an opportunity that they may not have had maybe beyond an opportunity to be like a tutor. So this would put them in a different situation. One of the keys to this program would be taking advantage of cooperating mentor teachers. So all teachers will have the opportunity to participate in this, but they also have the opportunity to not be a participant in this course if they're not comfortable with it. So this big picture, it would allow our students to get involved with a class. They already are tutoring our students, they're helping out in other ways. This would just give them a different platform to pursue maybe being a secondary educator. I would like to give you one source of inspiration for this. Last spring, Mr. Bradley, one of our high school chemistry teachers, took small groups of his students to both middle schools, and they did chemistry demonstrations for the 7th graders. And the 3 students that that actually performed the chemistry demos, they were up front, they were teaching the 7th grade students. And one of them in particular said that she would have loved an opportunity to do something like this her senior year. So she maybe didn't want to necessarily major and become a chemistry teacher, but after doing this, she said that she really had a passion then for education. So I just thought that, she did such a fantastic job too. I just thought it would be a good thing for us as a high school to give kids that opportunity. So the students will be taking on a few responsibilities, one of which will be teaching and facilitating. This obviously comes to the discretion of the teacher. The teacher would work as a cooperating mentor. So a lot of the how involved the students do get would come at the discretion of that teacher. They're not just going to be thrown in on the first week to teach a full class. So the same way that our teachers here at the high school work with the student teachers from colleges and universities, they would take a similar approach to work with our 12th graders. So when the time is right, the students can accept a little bit more responsibility, but you would expect them to be able to lead some small group work, maybe just one-on-one work, but eventually getting to the point where they could teach an entire lesson. And from what I saw last year with those students teaching the 7th grader, our students definitely have the ability to teach a lesson in some of our classes. So the student intern development, this would be an interesting, exciting opportunity for our teaching and learning office to also give those students who are interns some seminars, almost like what they would receive at the college level. So almost put on like little miniature professional development sessions during the flex blocks on Wednesday, so maybe about once a month. The students would be expected to attend class every day in which that class is occurring for the class in which they are paired. The timeline of what this would look like, so this would be a program, and the program would have an application that would go out in the springtime. The application is going to be very thorough. It's going to outline all the details of the program so that students know exactly what they're getting into. This is not just an opportunity for a student to go hang out with maybe their favorite teacher for their senior year. They're going to be expected to do some teaching, in that class in different capacities. So we would then work on pairing those interested students with the cooperating teachers in the first few weeks of the semester. But again, the teacher would have the ultimate say in whether or not they want to be a participant in this program. And just like the independent study course that we do have, or the independent study option that we have at Emmaus High School, there would be an agreement in place just so that both the teacher and the student know exactly what they're getting into and what the expectations are. What this looks like in the classroom, I'm sure there's going to be, I'm sure there's a lot of questions about this. And so I've worked with a couple of the teachers and some guidance counselors on this very topic. And so we have a detailed list that we would provide the students and also the teachers of the do's and don'ts. This is an opportunity for students to pursue their passion for secondary education and not do things that would be outside of what a teacher's responsibility would do. So that is something that we have carefully outlined, but that's also something that we're going to continue to refine between now and the springtime when we do release these applications. The grading, there will be a grade associated with this. It will not factor into the GPA, but we do want to, we would like the student interns to create a teaching portfolio, very similar to what a lot of educators already create when they're in college, a teaching portfolio of their experiences while they're working with high schools, while they're going through their college experience. We would like them to do something very similar. There will be a grade, again, but it will not be factored into the GPA. And the students will receive credit value. They'll receive credit value that is equal to the course in which they are interning, up to 1 credit in total value. So if a student is interning with a PE teacher that might be a quarter credit, they would receive a quarter credit, assuming that they're going to be there every single day, which is the intention of the program. Are there any questions about the student intern program?
Mr. Jankowski?
Yeah, I mean, continuing on the theme of these curriculum changes, I think this, beyond just the education experience for these students, I mean, this is public speaking, this is leadership, having the opportunity to be before your peers and present. One of the points you referenced was one of my concerns, is the privacy of the students whom these other students are teaching to, and protecting. I mean, are they going to be involved in grading, or is it all just instructional and the teacher handles everything else?
Protecting the privacy of all students, both the intern and the students in the classes, is basically the primary goal of when we're outlining the do's and the don'ts. We do currently have some of the students at Emmaus High School that are working with some of the students from the IU, and so there are some things that we can definitely learn from other programs. And I said before, there's other programs out there that are similar to this that we can certainly learn from. We have teachers in our, some of the department chairs, when I presented this to them, they had mentioned that they had gone through this themselves when they were in high school. So there's, I think, a lot of schools out there that we can learn from to be able to handle things like that appropriately. But I certainly agree with you, protecting the privacy is of the utmost importance. But no grading, nothing that would have to do with confidentiality.
Mr. Smith?
So this is, I don't know if it's intended to be this way or not, but it seems like it's one of the most proactive ways to help with the current teacher shortage that we are facing. My question was about the teacher selection process, not so much the interns. How do we go about selecting the mentors, or how do you anticipate that? Is it, do teachers need to apply for that? And is there any consideration given to the mentor's own teaching styles and matching that with the learning styles or potential teaching styles of those interns?
Yeah, the current idea right now is that the students would express their interest in the springtime. The teachers, once they know their schedule, and that would be at the beginning of the school year then. So the beginning of the school year, teachers know their schedule, the students have their schedule. The students would then be proactive in trying to seek out potential potential mentor. So that would, the students would not just be going around to every teacher asking to be an intern for them. They would be seeking out teachers that they probably already have a relationship with from past years as a former student of theirs. So they would be asking expressing their interest to our current teachers. But our current teachers will all have the opportunity to express their interest in doing this or not. So I can say from experience that, you give me a week or two in some of my classes, and there's some classes that I think maybe would be a great fit, maybe not a great fit. And then also you get, the teachers can take the student's background into consideration as well. So I think that the reason that we have those first 3 weeks of the semester kind of blocked off, it would allow the students to seek out those teachers, but then ultimately the teachers are going to have that final say in whether or not they're comfortable with having a mentor, just based on a lot of different factors.
And do you see a potential for a mentor to have more than one intern, or is it a one-to-one?
I think there's potential for some of our teachers to have more than one mentor, but we don't want more than one, there's potential for our cooperating teachers to have more than one intern, but we don't want in this initial year to have more than one per class. So if they have 5 teaching periods and maybe they have 2 or 3 mentors in 2 or 3 different classes, that's fine, but we don't want in this first year to have 2 or 3 mentors in the same, or 2 or 3 interns in the same course.
Makes sense, thanks. Mr. Ballard?
I don't want to throw any cold water on this, but just to make sure, have we discussed this with our instructional aides to make sure that we don't involve any union issues in creating this program?
Yeah, one of the teachers that was on the committee that helped put this together is involved with our union, so she represented a lot of the teachers' interests very much so. We've also, in its initial stages, we worked with the high school administrative team to put some early ideas together, and then we got the teachers involved. So this has been seen by our teachers. And
okay, you said teachers, and I said instructional aides, and there are 2 different union groups.
Okay, then to answer your question, no, we have not shown this to instructional aides.
Okay, well, I would suggest that somebody make some kind of approach to them and make sure that we're not stepping on any particular toes that way.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Mr. Champagne?
I think it's a great opportunity for both graders. Will this just only be at the high school, or will they be able to go down to the middle school as well, or the elementary school, depending on their interest, if they have a passion for education?
In its initial year, we talked about keeping this at the high school, but there's certainly an opportunity for us to have further conversations to possibly consider that in the future. It's a great idea.
Graders who thought it was wonderful that high school was coming. I'm just wondering, again, somebody may have an interest in elementary ed versus, secondary.
Absolutely.
Dr. Levinson?
Will teachers be required to be in the room all the time with the intern?
Yes, and well, if there's a class going on, the teacher should be in the room anyway, but yeah, it's never going to be at the point where the teacher leaves the room with the student intern there with the students. That's absolutely not.
One of the slides said one-to-one, so I guess that's one-to-one within the
It might have been the student interns working on a one-to-one, so while maybe there's a differentiation type of structure going on, maybe all right. Like that.
Thank you.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes, are you targeting specific classes, specific courses?
No, pretty much what the student might be interested in, because the student can go through any course at Emmaus High School and maybe want to teach that someday. So we'd want to offer them an opportunity to pursue any course that they would have had already.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Munson?
So is this a program that the board will have to vote on?
My understanding is that this would be a program that would appear in the program of studies, and thus the need for this to be presented to you tonight.
And so what is the difference between this? I mean, the reason I ask that is because it seems like it's structured very closely to the independent study requirements and so forth. And so how does this differ in a way that would require a separate program? I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, how is this, which sounds great to me, but how is it different than just saying, well, this is going to be one path of independent study?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with the independent study, but my understanding is that this would be more of the cooperating teacher is going to be there in that class with the student intern, where it's not happening independently. That's my understanding of it, but I could be wrong. Whereas with the independent study, it's not always so much one-to-one. But again, I would want to follow up with you on that one because I might not be correct with that.
So in the program of study, this is going to appear as a separate thing. It's not going to be under independent study. It's going to be, there's independent studies, and then there's the intern program.
Correct. Yeah, this would be a separate program listed with other programs in the POS.
Great, thank you.
I guess, is that all the questions? Thank you very much for the presentation. And one more.
Okay, so school within a school. The last presentation we have for you tonight is also a very important presentation for the East Penn School Board and community. Over 4 years ago, while I was in the process of revising science curriculum, I began taking different groups of leaders and teachers to visit the Science Leadership Academy, part of the School District of Philadelphia. It's also known as the SLA. The SLA is an established, well-known school within a school. Over multiple years of visits at SLA, many teachers and leaders would marvel at what they observed and heard after talking with SLA students and teachers. Many of our teachers wanted to provide such an opportunity to our students as well as work in that environment. I'm going to quote Mike Mahalik after his first time there, before he was an administrator, and he was still in the classroom, and I have it in writing. He said, "The culture was one of collaboration, real-world learning, reflection, embracing failure, appropriate goals, and the closest thing to a real-world setting I've ever seen in a school ever." When Mike Mahalik took over in curriculum last year, he took his first group and later a special visit for our counselors, where they had one-on-one time with the principal, Chris Lehman. Science Leadership Academy has had some magical opportunities. The School District of Philadelphia gave the opportunity for a leader and a group of teachers to build a school within a school around core values of inquiry, research, collaboration, presentation, and reflection, where project-based learning and community are central. They also had the opportunity to partner with the Franklin Institute. The Science Leadership Academy is not without its challenges as part of the School District of Philadelphia. In fact, if you research them right now, they are in the middle of an immense challenge as they are in the process of being relocated from Ben Franklin High School due to asbestos. After I assumed the assistant superintendency, I also planned a trip for secondary leaders to the Delta program. It's in the State College School District, and we went last year. I'm sure that some of you are familiar, but State College School District is demographically comparable to EPSD in addition to its size. Still not as big as EHS, they have 2,300 in their high school. The Delta program, like the Science Leadership Academy, is a school within a school. Once again, our visit was powerful. Over time, their community demand for their school within a school grew to the point that this program has a newly constructed building this year, and it's successfully expanded to the middle level years ago. At EPSD, we have a diverse community. We have community members that demand a rigorous curriculum and an environment that mimics their own learning experiences, AP offerings, and solid test scores. We also have community members that resent weighty testing, demand real-world applications, and the means to make kids feel they have a voice, choice, and agency in their own learning. Just as this spectrum is reflected in the community, this is also reflected in diversity among our teaching staff. How could it not be? There is not a lot of room in an AP curriculum for the pursuit of a student's interest in ancillary topics. AP curriculum demands mastery of a breadth of content standards, yet we also know that some teachers and students want to go deeper, make connections, let students explore and communicate related interests, and get involved in real-world opportunities in the community. And so we grapple with how do we meet all the demands. This might also answer some of our students' needs in how do we make a large high school feel smaller. We are one of 29 high schools in Pennsylvania who have over 2,000 students in the high school. In each instance, what we know is that a school within a school relies on a vision that serves students, uses a consensus-building model for decision-making, has a leadership and teachers who want this opportunity as much as the students and parents. And tonight we are presenting to you that all those components exist, that we have a vision we would like to share, we have the leadership, we have interested teachers, and we know we have the students and parents who will be interested in such a program. We don't have an official name for it yet, but Mike Mahalik is going to present to you a vision and high-level overview for school within a school and a proposed pilot for East Penn School District for next year.
I'd like to start with the mission, vision, and the portrait of an East Penn graduate. I think this is a very important place to start. This is, if you read it, which I'm sure you're all familiar with it, this is a mission and vision. These are goals that we obviously want our students to get to that point. But maybe there are different ways to get our Emmaus High School students to those goals. And so what this program is all about is maybe meeting the needs of our students in a slightly different way, but still meeting those needs and allowing them opportunities to reflect the portrait of the graduate. And this model is a way, or the model basically allows for that to happen through project-based learning in our classrooms, but with a major emphasis on connecting it to our local community. So there's been a couple themes tonight that through all the curriculum proposals that have come up, differentiation is one, and yet and what we're looking at here is maybe differentiating the way in which we're teaching our high school students and getting them to the same goals, but just a much different way. Another thing is becoming better citizens and more engaged citizens and just healthier individuals. So this is another area of emphasis with this program. So again, big picture, we would still like our students to get to the same goal, but just maybe there's a different way, a different approach that we can get them there. So an overview of the school within a school, some of the core values of this program and some of the inspiration behind it. The community-based aspect is going to be something that would make our program unique. There's a lot of different school within a school models out there, and I think they're all a little bit different. They all should be a little bit different. What might work for SLA, Science Leadership Academy, might not be what's going to work for us at Emmaus High School. So I've gone through a couple of different events recently within the curriculum revision that we've been doing, where we've had some community members come in with our computers and business department and also our tech ed department. And one of the things that is definitely jumping out is there is an interest in our community to get involved with our high school students. And there's also an interest from our students' perspective to have authentic work within their community that they can, so they can see their work on display, or that they can have an authentic context for the different projects that they're working on in class. So we definitely want to have this to have a community-based feel to it. I mentioned before the project-based learning format. That would be the way in which the course is delivered. So we would be looking at 4 core courses in its initial year that would take on a different delivery. So the same curriculum, but just in a different delivery. And that delivery would be project-based. So the students would be doing really meaningful work, authentic work, while being taught the same curriculum that they would be otherwise. There's personalization to this, and the personalization, a lot of that is really within the design and development course that I presented earlier. The students would be able to seek out their own passion projects, and that could be within STEM, that could be humanities. It's really up to the student what they want to pursue. And then the social and emotional learning aspect, I think empathy is going to be a major theme to this program. One of the first steps that you can take in solving problems is to find out what are the needs, and really you're able to find out those needs when you talk to people. When you talk to different people, you're going to find out what could they use that would make their lives better. And so that empathy piece is going to be an essential, almost like a starting place for a lot of the problem solving, but that is a way for our students to get some of those softer skills that are in the portrait of the graduate that might be more difficult to do when you're surrounded by 4 walls in the traditional classroom. So putting our students in, giving them the opportunity to communicate with adults in the workforce and industries, and also giving them an opportunity to socialize with one another is a really important thing at that particular age for adolescents. What does school within a school look like in terms of the community partnerships and the projects? There would be a variety of projects that would be included in the 9th grade core courses, and they would potentially change as students go from 9th to 10th, 11th to 12th grade. So some of the projects initially could be embedded within the original curriculum. There's also an opportunity maybe down the road to expand the scale and the scope of some of these projects. So if you're looking for an example, one that I came across by total accident was I talked to my wife about this idea, and she's involved with Lehigh County Humane Society, and she told me that there's boxes at the Humane Society that go back to 1906 when they started, and it basically, they have the records to tell the history of the Humane Society, and it was all about protecting protecting children and a lot of horses back then, and that stood out to me because I always associate with dogs and cats, and she said that they have a story to tell. And when I heard that, I didn't expect that conversation to end in an American history project or a writing assignment. And so there's a lot of different companies out there, there's different individuals, there's so many people out there that might have an opportunity for us to partner with and for us to be able to help them. Maybe they have limited resources, but our students could do some really authentic work. And the students would be able to see that work on display and have those connections. So initially, the projects would be within the classes, but eventually, if you're thinking long-term growth of the program, this could turn into something bigger, maybe junior year where we could have an internship or an externship program as part of it. The course sequence that we initially have identified would be project-based global science inquiry, which is a 9th grade science course, project-based ELA for 9th graders, project-based American Studies 1, and then the project-based design and development course, which is the only new course to this sequence. So the students in this program would go through those 4 core courses as a freshman. We have ideas as a sophomore that they could go through biology and then ELA as a 10th grader, American Studies 2, and then the design and development 2 course, we would have to figure out what exactly we want that to look like. But we have not included math. They're going to be going through a curriculum revision throughout next year. So we wanted to keep that one out of this sequence for right now, and then they could look into a project-based math course or math courses through their revision next year. We wanted to keep it with these 4 in its initial launch. This is to be determined. I don't want to spend too much time with this one because the core team would have a lot of input on where do we want this to go. And I think this program would require a lot of reevaluation from year to year. Is this working? What's working? What's not working? Where do we want this to go? And so I think, I'm just going to move on from this one. This is to be determined, and literally it's a conversation for another day, but we still recognize that this could end up in a fantastic place. There would be some really exciting opportunities from, if you look at some of those 11th and 12th grade courses, to turn some of those courses into project-based. The personalization piece, I've mentioned this before, the design and development course. This is where the students are going to become better problem solvers as a freshman. So if they're part of this program, they're going to be learning these design thinking skills that they can then incorporate into other project-based courses, or they can incorporate them into other courses that might not be part of this program, because all the students are going to have plenty of other courses that are outside of this program. And so this would be a really good skill for our freshmen to have, again, going back to design thinking and teaching them to be better problem solvers. So that course would allow them to seek out their own passion projects, and really there's no way of knowing how great that could be. We could have some fantastic creation as a result of that, which is pretty exciting to think about. The projected timeline of the School Within a School launch this year, if this is approved, the initial steps would be identifying the faculty members who would want to be teaching in the project-based format next year. In that first cohort. They would serve on this core team, and the core team would go on site visits. Delta and State College would be one, and Science Leadership Academy in Philadelphia would be another. I would take on a lot of the responsibility with number 3, and that is continue to build partnerships with local companies, businesses, and organizations to have some authentic projects. And there's a lot of, this is going to be an ambitious task. So a lot of the companies and businesses, they might not know what makes a good school project. So it would be a lot of time spent working with them to give them some assistance on this would be a good project for a school, maybe a 9th grade course, or maybe this would be better for something greater, potentially maybe like their junior or senior year. So there would be a lot of one-on-one meetings to work with those partnerships to get those projects ready. We'd have to provide the teachers who are going to be part of this core team with professional development. That's going to start with inquiry. So inquiry would be the foundation of this program, and then that would lead into project-based learning, design thinking for those teachers. And then we'd want to continue to look at the curriculum. I mentioned before, we're not looking at curriculum changes. It's the same stage 1 curriculum that you've already board approved. It would just be a different delivery, and providing the teacher support in changing the delivery, and that's going to look different when it comes to assessment, and then also the day-to-day teaching practices. the pilot goal in its first year, so the goal would be to have 32 to 48 students next year. So this would be 2 teaching sections. So we would have 2 sections of ELA, 2 sections of American Studies 1, 2 of Global Science Inquiry, and 2 sections of the Design and Development coursework. And I mentioned this, I just want to say it one more time, that the math would not be part of the program initially, but there would be the opportunity potentially down the road to incorporate math.
So for budget, we don't anticipate anything 6 figures associated with project-based learning, but one of the things that's very simple is perhaps even a change in classroom furniture. Right now, most of the high school classrooms have those desks with the tablet on top, and so tables and chairs might be something that we would look into. Place-based educational experiences, we spend money on transport, so I have the $13,000 we spend just, transporting elementary up for planetarium and orchestra, nothing over that, we would imagine. We're simply thinking we would need transport to local companies or opportunities, again, in our community. Physical space, that would be really determined by the core team of teachers and Mr. Mahalik and Dr. Kieris as we move forward, but the core space will be inside the high school, and we know that for certain. And then obviously could be implications long-term, depending on how the program evolves. So right now, this program fits the program of studies as it is approved and the graduation requirements for Emmaus High School, but the program could evolve and things could look differently as we proceed. In terms of staffing, there is a mention here of 1 additional math teacher being optional. We can do without this additional math position next year, but when we say it's optimal, there's some other implications of what we could do with that additional math position. Mr. Geist, who was here earlier to present to you, he has been an integral part of the Project Lead the Way program. He's went to 2 different trainings amounting to 4 weeks of his summer to be trained for Project Lead the Way, and he is also the designer of the Design and Development course. He also designed, if you recall, a very successful project-based statistics course. And we imagine he's going to be an integral part of designing some of the project-based math curriculum for other courses inside Emmaus High School. So it may not be something that we only offer as an option inside school within a school, but something that we offer to all students more broadly and work with other teachers to adopt those type of teaching methods with math.
So to conclude, why this is the right time for East Penn School District and Emmaus High School, we have a lot of exceptional people in place already to be able to do this work internally. With Erin Murphy and the work that she's done in her career with project-based learning, with our high school administration and the work that they've done with Mrs. Jessica Thatcher coming in with her experience with competency-based grading from 21. I've realized with some of the work that I've done with the departments is that I feel like I have a lot more community partnerships than I ever was really aware of. So I think we have the right people in place to do this work right now. We have time to build it into what it could eventually be and what we want it to be. So I think a lot of times with this presentation, it's very easy to think and get overwhelmed when you're thinking about long-term, what this could look like in 4 to 5 years. And so I just want to remind you, like in its simplest form, this would be next year an opportunity for students to want to express their interest in learning in a project-based way and being taught in a project-based way by teachers who are open to teaching in a project-based way. And it's really as simple as that. What could happen in 4 to 5 years is that's exciting to think about, but we have time to address those all of those needs. We have 3 schools that are willing to help. Science Leadership Academy in Philadelphia is definitely willing to help. Delta and State College, and then also PSI, they say Sci-High down in Florida. I did a visit down there, and so they have a slightly different twist to their school than a school as well. Our mission, our vision, and the portrait already support the work that this program would allow for, and I think that's really important. There's nothing that this program has that is not something that is within our mission, vision, and the portrait. It is all there. It's just a different way. It's a different delivery of allowing our students to get to that end goal. If the recent computer business collaboration that I was speaking about before is any indication, we do have a lot of interest in the community to partner with our schools. They recognize the need for some of our students to develop some of the softer business skills. And so they would be excited to have the opportunity to work with some of our students to give them that, to give them those skills and those trainings. And I also think that there's also an interest in them to take some of our better students and try and show them what are potential opportunities right out of high school. With some of the manufacturers in particular, I think that they're looking for some of our best students at Emmaus High School. This is a very equitable opportunity for all students at Emmaus High School. So if students are in this program, they're all going to have the same opportunities, and that's why we were asking for some of the budget considerations to take them to, like a Mack Trucks, for instance, if that's the partnership that we're exploring at that particular time. So I think a really good way to wrap this up is this is not for everyone. This is not for every student. This was never meant to be for every student. This is not a threat to AP. This is not a threat to LCTI. This is a college prep curriculum, and it might be the perfect thing for some students. It might be the perfect thing for some teachers, but again, it's not for everyone. We recognize that, and so we don't need this to be a shift for 750 students. It's really giving those students an opportunity to learn in a project-based way.
Questions? Lots of questions. Ms. Bowman.
First, I just want to thank you for the presentation, and also even just for bringing it up. I hadn't heard about school within a school before this was on the agenda. I mean, obviously it's been around for a long time, but it's new to me. I just have a few questions. One was in doing some research before the meeting, it seemed like this is something that has worked incredibly well in some places and been an abysmal failure in other places. And I'm wondering what steps you're looking at taking to increase the probability of the success and avoid the failure.
I think an important thing is to consider what's important to us. Okay. We're not going to copy SLA. We're not going to copy Sci-High. We're not going to copy Delta. It's what do our students need? Who do we have around us that is willing to help? And so I think it's a really important part, especially when the research is happening. And it's a challenge. It's to look at the research, and not all of the research is necessarily going to apply to us in this particular model. So I certainly recognize that that's a challenge. So I think listening to our students is really important with this, because we want to make sure that we're doing, we're giving them that project-based learning. We want to make sure that we're giving them those opportunities, because that's what this program is all about, giving them those opportunities. So I think constantly checking in with them and making sure that this is working for them is a really important part.
Thank you. And then it sounds like in some places there's a theme to the school within a school, but in this model as proposed, there's no theme, like it's not tech, it's not something else?
Correct. There's no set theme right now besides community, and that's getting involved with our community. And it doesn't have to be, it could be STEM, humanities, who knows what, but just giving the kids an opportunity to partner with all of those willing around us. And that's what will make our program unique.
Okay. And then the project-based learning aspect of it seems like something that, for all the presentations tonight, kind of ran through all of them. And so, and also even when I was looking up, like, what is school within a school, like, that's one of the things that, or one of the selling points. And actually all the other selling points seem like things we would want all of our students to have. And so when you said it's not for everyone, I didn't understand, like, why, who is the perfect school within a school student, and why is this not something for the other students?
I just want to explain the other piece to this, and there is an opportunity to have a schedule that looks different in a school within a school, and then there's also an opportunity to have grading look different. And so as you're familiar with our high school right now, there are midterms and finals. We made some changes to make them less weighty, but that's still very much a piece in of the process of being part of the traditional Emmaus High School. And so that type of thing you would not see inside the school within a school, like the weighty midterm and final. But there are people in our community who feel very strongly that prepare students for that next step. So that's just one example, but go ahead.
To speak to the project-based learning part, project-based learning is essentially you have a project, and all of the learning activities within a unit would be happening within that project. So it gives you that authentic context right away, as compared to a project being, back when I was in high school, the project was maybe at the end of the unit, and it was the final project that you did, and it would look a lot different. So it gives them that authenticity right away. And so some students actually prefer more of a traditional model, and that would be what we probably went through as students ourselves, where they like more the direct instruction that ends in a test, and that model works for some. Where other students, they like having that authenticity and be able to do more and just get more engaged with their work.
I'll just make a comment and then I'll let others ask questions. But it seems to me, just from the perspective of a parent of a child who would not be considered the right child for this, for a school within a school, that when I've seen the most excitement about school, it's not been the memorize everything and regurgitate it on the test moment. And I'm parenting the kid that you would say shouldn't be in this, right? This is the AP kid.
No.
But when I have seen excitement, it was I'll give you an example. When Mrs. Blose in, I think, 5th grade, I can't remember, asked the kids to write a persuasive essay to talk someone into changing their mind about something. And those kinds of projects are the things that throughout the school experience I've actually seen a spark, and many other experiences not so much. And I think it might be, so I know there's some kids who do really love the reading and the studying and the test taking, they're probably there too, but I just think some of these things that you're talking about make sense for a lot more students than what you're saying want to be in this program.
I just want to clarify that we didn't say it was meant for an AP student. Okay. So what we're saying is actually any student could be in it. So AP students could still be in the school within a school if, as the way it is right now, and take an AP class in the regular Emmaus High School at other periods. As it evolves, we're obviously looking for it to be more self-contained. But yeah, CP or G, like you think about our kids coming out of the middle school, we have 2 tracks in the middle school and then they go to the high school. It's the GP or CP kid who could easily be in this program as well as the honor student. We're just talking about right now, as we're stuck complying to the graduation requirements in the transcript that we currently have, it's a CP weight.
Okay, oh, gotcha.
Okay.
Dr. Levinson?
So do you have a process outlined for how you're going to select students or have the students select to be in the program?
Yeah, the idea right now is, if this is approved, that this would go in the program of studies, and the education piece is going to be essential with this one, educating the students and also parents, the community, about what this is really going to look like, both in the short term and then also our best guess is what it look like in the long term. So the between now and then I guess the time when the students would be picking their courses in the springtime, the 8th graders, we would be looking at going down to the middle schools and educating them. It's going to be a very ambitious effort to try and really meet with people as much as needed, to give them all the information that they'd have, that they need to know to be able to make the best decision. We have that target, the goal of 32 to 48 students. So one of the things that the core team is going to have to decide is what happens if there are more than 48 students that do want to be a part of this program. So that is something we certainly recognize as a decision that does need to be made relatively soon.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
First, I just think this is excellent, but the word that I want to use to describe it, in my mind, is disruptive. And I mean that in the best sense of that word, in terms of disruptive from an innovation standpoint. This completely, I think, has the potential to put a whole other dynamic on the high school experience for a lot of our kids, and that's the risk in undertaking something like this really doesn't happen without an organizational hierarchy of needs, if you will, and that we can't undertake these kinds of things if we're not sound across all other aspects of an organization. So the fact that we're even having this conversation right now is a real testament to what we have already as a foundation piece here in East Penn. I did have several questions. Thankfully, some of them you've already answered. So in some of my research that I was looking at, granted, some of it was older. I couldn't find a whole lot that was within the last 10 years, and certainly I couldn't find anything, as you mentioned, that was related to project-based learning. But what I saw was that there, in one particular example, that there was a potential for students that were in this school within a school to, and the word that the research had used was stratification, and that the students that were in this in different in different courses would kind of separate themselves out, and they would kind of come in, and you'd have, okay, these are the AP kids kind of taking it, and here are the other college, the CP kids, and how do we, is that something that you came across in your research, first of all? And second of all, how do you see, and you've talked a lot about the students that could be in this, how do you see a program like this that brings all of these kids from all these different tracks together into one? How do you see them, or how do you see yourselves working to prevent that kind of stratifications where all these kids from all these different levels, all these different backgrounds are working under a common purpose?
So I can speak to that and say there are some non-examples that I'm not mentioning in terms of visits or investigation. So the two that I do mention, when we go and do our visits there, we are overwhelmed by the sense of community that they have. You will immediately understand a feeling, and we actually intend to invite board members to go on a site visit to see both of these schools. They are highly collaborative with us, so that's another big takeaway. So I'll give the example of the Delta system. The administrator in charge of Delta meets with families and students individually as they're going through the process of enrollment, make sure that they understand what they're applying to, and make sure that, again, they understand what the expectations are of that community. So it does, we're looking at models that, when he talked about social emotional learning, definitely also emphasizes that sense of community and that sense of respect, and basically there are some intangibles that you'll see as part of a site visit.
Okay, and the last quick question I have for now was, assuming we approve this in a couple weeks, after the pilot is done, is this going to come back up then again? Would it come up again for a vote in a year from now? Or
what we would anticipate is that after an initial pilot, Mike's going to work with teachers and through the site visits to develop, we talked about using consensus building to basically build the model. Then we would anticipate at the same time next year, we would come with a more fully fleshed out vision in terms of what it would look like in year 2 and possibly year 3. Okay. I think what we're really looking for out of the teachers are teachers who are also going to be comfortable evolving with the program, and that was key in the 2 successful school within the schools that we visited. Is, tonight we approved a lot of curriculum, and the teachers will work together collaboratively, but that's the class they know they're going to teach. And so we have teachers who already want to jump on board, who want to have this ability to do what they saw, because they saw proof of concept.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Ballard.
Okay, schools like Science Leadership Academy have been described in literature as essentially magnet schools, where they have put up a science curriculum and project-based learning and put it forth as a school of, if you will, choice. And I'm trying to understand a few of the parameters around that in working in the East Penn School District. Most of the ones that I'm familiar with have an identified collaboration partner in some kind of educational institution, like SLA has Franklin Institute, and I believe the State College one has State College, Penn State, involved with it as an educational partner. Have you any thoughts about who would be the educational partner for East Penn?
We've talked about it at this point. We also, and if anybody's been reading the paper, we also met with the Emmaus Community Arts and Innovation Center in terms of talking to them about who they plan to engage in, because that's in walking distance of our high school. So Mike and I actually met with them last Friday morning? That's right. To talk to them about what their plans are and hoping to become part of that planning as well. In terms of a larger institution, we have not approached any one institution at this point to become partner with us. It's not out of the question, it's just not something that we've done at this point.
Well, based on the models that I've seen, wouldn't it be more successful to partner with one of those educational institutions? We have a number in the area.
We can do that. We weren't limiting ourselves to that until we convened all of the teachers who are going to be part of the program.
Okay.
Do you want to speak to?
Think about it, please.
I will, we will, thank you.
The SLA model itself uses specialized learning software, it's my understanding. They have something called Canvas that is a web-based program that has been sort of designed to support project-based learning. Are we looking at finding something like that, or are we going to try to use what we're currently using, or what is our plan?
Our learning management system right now it's fully, I would say, like a beta. It's Google Classroom. We have Schoology and Canvas as potential, but it's a budget issue for us, as potential more robust learning management systems, and that's not something we would limit to the school within a school. We would have that district-wide. We have a learning management committee, an LMS committee that's about to launch to look at the different programs, and we were invited. Parkland is currently scheduled with Schoology, which is another learning management system, and we were invited to a Parkland event.
Okay, and I guess my last concern, essentially you're producing a cohort of students inside the high school that are specially selected. And they're going to be a cohort that learns together and projects together and does all these things together. And it has the possibility of inciting concerns about elitism or favoritism, or they're just different than us in the schools. I believe, reading the news reports like I do, that SLA has had some problems with that in the area that they are in Philadelphia. And I'm wondering what your plan is to try to address making that, quote, school within a school. I think maybe calling it a magnet program or something that doesn't say it's a separate school might be better, but you'll have to think about that. But what is your plan to ensure that this school within a school, as you call it, does not develop that kind of characteristic within Emmaus High School?
So you mentioned Science Leadership Academy, and as you can appreciate, the School District of Philadelphia has thousands of students who are applying to a school within a school that can accommodate 500 kids. I think right now we're starting out with a vision, like ultimately, would we love to have 500 kids in this program? Yes. But we're not selecting the students. This is actually a mutually agreed upon educational choice, just as much as how you choose your schedule in the high school system for now. Again, when I talked to the leaders at State College and I met with their assistant superintendent, the request for the middle school program that had climbed to the degree that they looked to re-examine their entire middle level program. But that's also building capacity in your community and your other stakeholders to see that this type of education is worthwhile when, again, you have some diversity among your population in terms of what they expect to see.
Well, that doesn't say what your plan is to try to address those potential concerns.
I would just like to add with Sci-High, their model is they go into a lottery system. If their cap was 48, as soon as 49 students apply and they go beyond that, it does go into a lottery where it's not, there's no selection. It's the students decide that they would want to be part of this program. The lottery then goes into place. So that I just wanted that is an option that we could consider to prevent it ever from getting to the point of picking those students and having that elitism.
Well, I just want to point out that just discriminates against the unlucky students. There's a lucky group and an unlucky group. You're creating a group that can have a cohesive social organization, if you will, inside another social organization. And when you talk about cliques, adolescents and teenagers are famous for creating those. So I'm trying to understand, what will the messaging be? What will the integration of all these students into all of the programs of the high school, all of that stuff be thought out in terms of making sure that this is just another set of classes and not anything, quote, special, unquote, that causes angst amongst the parents or concerns or cliques among the students. So I just want to make sure that we have thought of that and are prepared to deal with it in terms of how we're going to structure this.
Yes, and we intend to put it into the program of studies as a program, similar to what we had in terms of the student internship, that this is a program that's available, but again, we're going to meet all the graduation requirements with already approved curricula. We hope to bring student requests back to you. It would probably be mid-spring till we know how many students are actually interested in the program. And then he and I and some other leaders have the intent to meet with families to help them understand exactly what the program entails once we have more information at that point.
Okay, but please consider those aspects.
Yes.
A question? Dr. Munson?
Yeah, so I'm not sure that I'm not sure I've seen a presentation since I've been on the board where I felt as much passion come from the people who are presenting it than I did with this. And that's despite the fact that we've heard several presentations before and so forth. I mean, I haven't done any research on this of my own because I wanted to hear this presentation first. But I'm struggling to understand what this is. As an outsider, when I listen to the presentation and I see this, it uses all of the same buzzwords as all of the other presentations did about the other curricular changes. And I mean, someone called this disruptive earlier, but help me understand how this is different than what we're already doing. I mean, if we're meeting the same graduation requirements with the same curriculum, using several sections of the same courses that everyone else is taking, what is it? What is it that makes you, I mean, I want to understand your passion, like why you're passionate about this as opposed to any of the other things that we're doing.
So I can answer this in this way, and I am passionate about this. This is a tricky business because we're trying to present something before we involve a group of teachers to commit themselves to this work. And so we're presenting something without all the framework or the consensus building in place. So it is somewhat an act of faith. In terms of the vision is that it won't replicate or look like the traditional, this is a baby step, because there are other ways that we can change use of time for these students. So in let's say right now in the traditional 4 periods that we have that are 42 minutes long, I can have these students go on a rotating block. I have other options in terms of use of time because they're all tied together. And so there is some flexibility that we didn't go into. We weren't trying to go into the weeds tonight, and I apologize for that. But so there's also some other things that we can do in terms of advisory periods, which we don't have necessarily present. That's not to be confused with flex, and that is something you can research. A student advisory, we think, is a very important component to this program. Now, we were sure that our teachers who are involved will be crucial in developing that program. And so there is some pieces here that aren't developed at this point because we intended to, again, invite you to come with us on the visit with the teachers who are committed to the program and see it in action, and then have your own takeaways from what you see in those 2 programs. But again, I can answer more specific questions about the options, but it does give us some options to start and to get a group of teachers working together just as much as it is a group of students under the same type of a vision. So all of the words, like I gave science leadership's, their 5 core values, and I recited those earlier for you. There will be core values that will be part of this program that might not be. When you're talking about doing I would say a partnership with Air Products, and it's kind of like there's no terminus to that until the work isn't done until it's complete. The traditional high school schedule doesn't necessarily accommodate that type of work all the time. And so there's ways, we saw amazing things in terms of kids who had capstone projects at Science Leadership Academy a junior who created her own conference on women's rights and held her own conference on the school site. Just a lot of different projects that are far more involved than the simple, like, there's different degrees of project-based learning. And that's what I would say. And when you're talking about involving the community and the outside, there tends to be a greater depth of work that's involved to be able to complete some of those projects, some of the things that we have our eyes on.
So I have a confession to make. When I was very young, my parents sent me to a free school. And it wasn't actually even in the United States, but for those who don't know, a free school is a school that has no grades, it has no grade levels, it has no specific courses. And is that what this is?
No. No.
Okay, so will these students get letter grades?
These students will be graded in accordance with the high school transcript at this time. What's interesting is in some school districts where they've evolved this school within a school, they can have a totally different program of studies, which looks different. But that wasn't sort of the baby step we were taking right now.
So in the pilot, the students would still get a grade in GSI and American Studies 1
Yes.
and so on and so forth?
Yes.
And will they meet during the same time periods as every other class?
So if I can put it to you this way, because we are getting into the weeds, and I apologize because I know it's late. If I wanted to teach in block, so right now with STEM, physics, and POA, there's a couple different ways to do this, by the way, but a rotating block, and Ziad, you've been here with me, so it's a little complicated, but you can have the two 42-minute periods collapse into one and give a teacher 84-minute period with the students. When I have this little self-contained unit, I'd have much greater flexibility to be able to collapse into these 84-minute shapes to give kids extended time to work on projects. I don't have that right now in the high school schedule. When it comes to an advisory period and which days that might disrupt to have student advisory, could be every day. Some models that we looked at had it every day. Now, still not free school, but each one had a focus, and one could be establishing the rules of the school, with one example that we saw at a middle level, where they kept trying to talk about student behaviors and things that were cropping up and problems that kids were having, and that was one example of an advisory period. And that could also look very different where they were actually working with teachers to talk about what they wanted to learn. And then also, I think, what's the other example at Delta that you saw? Their other day where they brought everybody into the room together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, some of the schools have built in, it's interesting when you look at it at its first appearance, there's a lot of flexibility in the courses that they offer, but then when you learn more about it, the students, I saw students taking a course called Painting with Bob Ross, and I thought it was Painting with Bob Ross, but what I didn't know is that was really the time for some of the teachers that were not teaching a course like that to be pulling students to give them additional help. That's when they're doing their interventions. So there was a lot of flexibility within something that looked like a fun Friday. I would just like to say one more thing. This program also would allow for the opportunity for students to maybe have some projects in different departments, like interdisciplinary work. So with these kids being in the same program, project that would have a little bit of American Studies and an English component to it, whereas in the traditional model right now, they might have some project-based learning in American Studies 1, but we don't know necessarily what teacher they're going to next period for English. So with this group staying together would be an opportunity to have some of those courses potentially meshed together in some creative ways to work on some projects.
So in that, I don't actually mean to be in the weeds. I really don't. Quite the opposite. I'm struggling to understand the vision. And so to your last point, because it seems project-based learning is kind of a central piece of this. Is it similar to the teams that LMMS has, right, where the students are going to the same classes with the same group of students, and the idea is teams can work together on projects?
When the middle schools collapse for a day and everyone in grade 6 is doing something, yes, it can look like that. I think in the first year we were again trying to go small and sort of come back in the proving ground of okay, here's the vision that we've set forward with this group of teachers. Do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I think in terms of maybe an advisory, it might be a little similar in that the teachers would know they'd be working with the same kids. But in terms of the actual teaching methods, I don't think it would look like what's currently being done at the middle schools.
And just to clarify, I guess I might as well explain advisory, but like where we have like child study teams and teachers are gathered and professionals to talk about a student, advisory is like a teacher in that time period is working with all of the students and around some central idea. And so advisory isn't like, and not just, what classes are you going to take next year, because I think some people think it sounds that way. It's typically, over some immediate issues that are occurring either in their community or globally or within the organization.
Let me just ask one, I guess I have one much more specific final question. One of the things that was listed on the last slide was the issue of it being an equitable opportunity. I'm not sure, like, I'm not sure what the equity angle is on this.
I think that would be something that needs to be a point of emphasis when we figure out who and how the kids get into this program. There are other models out there that, like I said before, it goes to a lottery system where it's not so much dependent upon the academic success you may have had in middle school or an essay requirement. Where really it's for kids that want to learn in this type of way, and we're looking at potentially a big group of kids that want to learn in this way. But that's part of the design of like how are we going to structure this program. That's something that I think we need to be really intentional about, is keeping this as equitable as we possibly can so that it's a fair opportunity.
Thank you.
Mr. Champagne?
Yes, I think this is interesting, and it has, potential for some very positive things, but I guess one thing I've learned over the time in business is it's almost like putting the cart before the horse in some sense. And the fact that we're all struggling to figure out what this is. We don't really have a good grasp of what it is and what it isn't. And there are some models out there that, you've referenced, and you've said, we want you to go and see these models. But in 2 weeks, we're being asked to approve this pilot. And I guess what I'm feeling is this, I don't have enough information and enough knowledge about what I'm approving to vote in an affirmative way. And in 2 weeks, I don't think I will have enough information and understanding to vote in an affirmative way. And I think, personally, I feel like we should be able to look at these models. If these institutions are as positive an influence on the communities and the students as you say they are, well, then I think we need to go see them, and you've seen them. But you're asking the board, who then has to explain to the public what you've just approved, and I struggle with that because I can't grasp all of the things, because a lot of it is still in flux. And I think we, as a board, need a better handle on what this is, how it's going to impact the students, how it's going to impact the community, so that when we are asked questions about it, we can concretely give them good answers. And in 2 weeks, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. So I really think before we go down a path of approving a pilot, we need to be able to get our hands around this and understand what it is in a better way. And I think seeing some of these models, or having some of these individuals come in and talk to us about what these things are, how it works with their district, how it works with their students, how the outcomes have shown that this is a great thing for a certain cohort of students. Before we go and kind of just say, okay, we're going to throw 30 or 40 kids into this, and we're going to kind of figure out how it's all going to come together in the next year. This is a radical change, and I'm not opposed to it, but I don't know enough to say, should I be opposed to it, or should I be in favor of it? And so therefore, I'm very reluctant at this point to kind of jump into this thing without getting some more handle on what it is. There's been no research that we've seen, like we had with the SRO. We had a substantial amount of research put forth in front of us so that we could make an informed decision, because that was a big step too. Well, this is even a bigger step. And I think that this is something that I just don't feel like it's, a presentation does it justice or gives us the chance to really figure out what we're going.
Can I share a mistake when I was a CNI supervisor? So when I was bringing Project Lead the Way here, I presented the idea of Project Lead the Way, but then we put the training for the 2 individuals who are going to teach it into the budget, so that basically they could come back and then do the POS presentation in the fall. But what happened is they went for the training in the summer, we did the POS presentation in the fall, and they didn't teach the course for the whole year, either of them. And then they sort of had to go back and, again, like retrain themselves essentially through contact with other districts when we didn't, because we weren't going to send them again to a very expensive training. But that was at the time where we had to bring them back so they could be very informative about what Project Lead the Way was. It was our 2 intro courses. And I'm just using that as an example or an analogy of kind of the position I feel like this is in at this point. Like, if we do all this work with the people and they put in all that time, right now we're taking a baby step where we're looking at exact credit, like comparable credit, it's CP credit. We're not blowing things up or necessarily going with, you know, no credit or a different POS. But that would be my only feedback at this time.
But I guess the difference with Project Lead the Way, from my perspective, that was, I could get a real clear understanding of what that was and how it fit and what the potential for that program was, because the courses were very well defined, and they were, you know, they had been, you know, they came through a system, you know, that universities had, you know, gone through and analyzed how this should work. They had been worked through, you know, other institutions locally had it. So, you know, when I looked at those courses and what that program could do for the students, it was easy to get your hands around it. I don't see the same thing around here. I agree with you that, you know, you don't want to waste all the energy and time with your faculty and your staff, but you're asking us is to take a step in 2 weeks that, you know, we've just been exposed to this, and you've been exposed to it for years, and you have a great passion for it, and I applaud you for that. But, you know, when we are being held accountable, it needs to be, you know, something that we have an understanding of, and we can explain to the parent, to the student, to whoever, the stakeholder, hey, this is what we're doing and why, and I just am not there yet. And again, I said in 2 weeks, I don't think I will be there yet, because I just don't have a good feel for it. And I don't have the information to make an informed decision.
So the only course that's included in the program for next year that has not been approved by the board already, that's not clearly defined, is the design and development. That mimics the engineering course, and to your point, like, is sort of a different, basically engineering agnostic of doing that same program.
It's not the course, it's the concept. The courses I understand.
Okay.
It's the broader concept of where this goes, how it works, who's involved, how we get the community involved, what the outcomes are going to be, what do we expect of the students when they get through with this program? You know, how do you deal with the kids that are, you know, have an AP aptitude mixed with the CP kids? All those things are kind of really fuzzy, and I just don't have a good sense of what it is that we're looking to do. You know, and that to me is troubling. This is my own perspective. I'm not trying to, you know, have anybody else feel this way, but this is the way I feel about it right now is, hey, I can't get my arms around it.
Are there any other comments or questions? Ms. Bowman?
This is just a suggestion, because in the reading I did before the meeting, it really helped me to understand what this was. And so I'm wondering if, because I'm also understanding the importance of getting this approved now so that you can make the program successful later, would it be possible to come back the next meeting and present to the board the science behind it, which would be how the programs that were successful, how they changed graduation rates and how they changed student success, and then maybe show if they're available. I believe they were, I didn't watch, but I believe there's some video clips that you could string together to show what these look like without doing a field trip for the whole board, and other things like that make it a little more tangible for board members who are not immersed in education. I also struggle too, a lot of times there's these buzzwords and I don't know what they mean, and they make sense when you do this for a living, but not when you don't. So I think like maybe showing those more tangible things would be helpful to the rest of the board. I don't know if it would alleviate all of the concerns that were raised, but it helps to make what you're talking about, something that you can visualize versus something that sounds like it might be a good idea, but we're just trusting you because we don't really know, if that makes sense.
Mr. Jankowski?
Yeah, I mean, to build upon what Mr. Champagne was saying, I mean, quite frankly, I'd like to see just a day in the life of one of these students. I mean, what does their school day look like compared to a normal school day?
Are there any other comments? I'd like to say a couple things. I think my view of this was close to Mr. Smith. I think this is what I grasp of the model is its flexibility, and I know that makes it hard to present it because it can be different things depending on the students and the teachers that are involved in the program. I think I would share Mr. Champagne's approach if we were saying the whole freshman year next year is going to be school within a school, but we're not saying that. It's going to be two classrooms full of it. And so I also sense the passion, and I see that your team has done the homework, visited schools where you actually see how it can function in different settings. And so my takeaway from it is wow, this is an incredibly innovative idea. Sometimes that's difficult to get across, and it's very exciting to me. And I think, yes, it's scary to do something like this, but I think I was thinking the other day, when I think about what we're introducing, we had a inquiry-based science curriculum, we have our one-to-one technology program, what are we going to do next? And here it is. So I sort of view it in that I actually applaud that you're not trying to say we're going to change the whole school, we're going to do all this thing. We're taking a very measured approach where people that want to be in it are self-selecting to be in it, so we're not mandating that, someone who this is scary to has to do it. So I did have a different perspective on this when I read it. So I sort of think, I think Ms. Bowman's suggestions are good. If there's a way, even sharing research, not necessarily another presentation, if you have some research that's appropriate to bring us all along, I think that would be helpful. But my takeaway from reading it and from hearing the presentation was wow. And I hope we do something like this because it sounds like make a
Thank you.
A tremendous change to some kids. So
thank you.
I appreciate it. Any other comments, questions? Okay, thanks.
Just a comment as well to follow up on actually all the board discussion, specifically about school within a school. We first and foremost thank you for your thoughtful reflection throughout the entire evening of presentations. We're coming up on hour 3 of really robust discussion, and we recognize that what we shared with you this evening certainly cannot happen without a commitment and strong leadership of this board. And with that will come questions and feedback to us in terms of, we're not quite sure what this means, or we'd like you to sort of highlight how this might look different, particularly when I say this, how might the school within a school look different for a core group of 9th graders as opposed to what all the other 9th graders might be getting. I think the challenge for us as well as a leadership team is you've learned tonight that there has been a lot of research that has been happening for several years. And so there's always that question of, should we have, at what point should we have maybe shared the idea sooner? But really, as district leaders, we take our responsibility very seriously to always be looking outside of our walls and saying, what else can we be doing? How can we be doing what we currently do even better? And so You've heard about site visits, not only within the state, but with outside of the state, and certainly those take a significant amount of time and preparation, and then coming back and debriefing. So there was a certain level of research that we felt that we needed to be able to do so that we could solidify our vision. And ultimately, it is the administration's responsibility to bring that vision and recommendation to the board. And then we look for your feedback in terms of, do we need further clarification of the vision? But typically, it would be the administrative team that goes out and does that research and brings that information here, and then certainly we can have a healthy debate about it. So we did hear, I certainly heard the feedback about maybe some further clarification, and I appreciated the suggestions. Oftentimes, what we try to do is also put that potentially in a board report so that you even are able to preview some of that information in preparation for the evening. And certainly, we never want anyone to feel as if we're rushing to get this in according to a timeline, but really, you see our leadership team being at the point where we feel like we do have a solid vision. We feel as if we've done the research. We know that we have some interested teachers, and to be able to implement a pilot, starting small for year one, we certainly feel confident in our ability to do that and see tremendous potential ahead. So again, thank you for the thoughtful discussion, the reflection, and we'll certainly work to bring you some clarification to those points for the next meeting.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the agenda. Report of the superintendent of the schools. Mrs. Campbell.
Some further celebrations. And actually, Ms. Whitman referenced this as part of when we were talking about school within a school. I just wanted to applaud the exciting work that's happening in the borough. I'm sure you recently learned that on October 7th, the Emmaus Creative Arts and Innovation Center, the ECAIC, debuted their proposal at the Borough Council meeting for the development of an arts center that provides what they're describing as cross-generational, traditional, and emerging arts education for the community. And you're aware that that proximity, among other things, is certainly very attractive with regard to the community partnerships that it could offer to the students of East Penn. You also heard Laura mention some recent meetings that we've had with the leadership team of the ECAIC, and I can share with you that really that collaboration and communication has been happening for some time, even not just with their immediate site, but some of the previous sites that had been considered. They had reached out to the district regarding potential partnerships. And so we certainly are proud to support and collaborate with ECAIC and look forward to the opportunities that might be ahead for our students. Speaking of our students, I'd like to recognize and congratulate Emmaus High School senior Elena Slack. That's probably a name that you recognize if you've been to any of our recent middle and more recently high school theater productions. Elena has had a supporting and or leading role for most of her middle and high school career here in East Penn. She was recently named to the NAFME All National Honors Ensemble. And so as a senior at Emmaus High School, she will join 550 high school musicians from across the nation in Orlando, actually next month, as part of her participation in that particular ensemble. So congratulations to Elena. Also a reminder to the community, if you've not already done so, please consider joining us for, I should say, signing up possibly to share your expertise with our students during our 2019 Career Exploration Fair, which is an event that is sponsored by the East Penn Education Foundation in partnership with our Emmaus High School Counseling Department. The event is open to all Lehigh Valley students and families, and it's being held on Tuesday, October 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. So again, all students and families are invited to come and participate in the event. And in addition, we are still welcoming businesses and organizations who might come and share their expertise regarding careers with our students. The Emmaus Police Department will be at EHS, actually tomorrow, October 15th through Friday, to enforce driver safety laws. Specifically, our Emmaus Police will be checking that our student drivers are wearing their seatbelts, just as a friendly reminder to not only our student drivers, but to everyone that driving comes with a tremendous responsibility. I'd also like to remind the community that this Wednesday, October 16th at 7 p.m. at Lower Macungie Middle School, there will be a presentation for the East Penn community on the vaping epidemic. And this presentation will be sponsored by Center for Humanistic Change, and we're opening it up to all East Penn families as well as local community members. The final date for our elementary report card parent night is November 18th. That will be held at Shoemaker Elementary, but again, all elementary families are invited to come. This is one last face-to-face opportunity for families to come and learn about the revised elementary report card prior to the first report card happening later this fall. A quick congratulations to our EHS golf team and Coach Brian for being named EPC champions. And I'd also like to congratulate our September LCTI Students of the Month in Masonry, Jordan Moyer, in Painting and Decorating, Emma Brown, and in Supply Chain Management and Logistics Technology, Tyler Miller. And finally, it's a great way to conclude my report. And I'd like to, in just a minute, I'm going to hopefully surprise and really not want to embarrass one of our administrators, but I would like to extend a heartfelt congratulations to Mr. Jim Frank, who's our Assistant Business Director. His recent PA Certified School Business Official status has been renewed through PASBO. And candidates who achieve this certificate must meet a series of rigid personal, ethical, and professional standards. And I, without a doubt, can say that Jim consistently models these high standards. He's a tremendous asset to our business office as well as to the entire East Penn community. So Jim, I'd just like you to come up and accept your renewed certificate. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments from Mrs. Campbell? Okay, moving on to personnel. There's one correction on Exhibit A. It's for the Girls on the Run Club. There are many shared leaders. One of them was named twice, one was left off in the name. So on page 4, Brenda Ringer should be replaced with Mary Toronto in the notes and name columns. So she's one of the people on that. So with that, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion on personnel? Ms. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Ballard?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman? Aye. Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Moving on to business operations, I have in business item E, the National Alliance on Mental Illness was withdrawn. So may I have a motion for items A through F minus the withdrawn?
So moved. Second.
Any comments or questions? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Ballard?
Aye.
Ms. Baumann?
Aye.
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski?
Aye.
Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Moving on to educational conferences. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Champagne?
Yes, I think it's wonderful that we're sending our guidance counselors. Some of those programs look like the Student Assistant Program, the Center for Humanistic Change, and the School Counselors Association. I think that opportunity sounds like a really good, I just would like to know a little bit more what it is, and how we think it's going to help with some of the issues we have around mental health and other things.
We currently have student assistance teams in all of our buildings. And so this is a process in which a student or students may be referred for concerning behaviors, and this particular team learns the process through which students' problems are identified. We help to identify interventions or solutions, and help those students be successful in the school. So what you see here is for many of the team members to be retrained.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
And we have those teams in place K to 12.
Any other comments or suggestions? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Munson.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Byrd.
Aye.
Mr. Champagne.
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
Dr. Bacher.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Moving on to policy. I know last time there was no changes, so I'll do it by exception when we get to it. May I have a motion to approve the policies?
So moved. Second.
Is there any discussion, any policies we want to discuss any further? Any comments? Mr. Munson?
I just
Dr.
wanted
Munson.
I'm sorry?
Dr. Munson.
I just wanted to confirm, I didn't see anything bold or highlighted, but there's no difference between this and what we saw last time. Is that correct? My question.
Anything else? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
Dr. Munson.
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Byrd.
Aye.
Mr. Champagne.
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Dr. Bacher.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Report from LCTI. Mr.
Yes.
Champagne?
The last meeting was held on September 25th. Some highlights from the meeting, the welding lab that we're working on is still on schedule for completion by mid-November. It's on budget. They have scheduled a grand opening for January 15th with a rain date of January 17th, 2020. The JOC seats for the upcoming year will remain the same as they are in 2019. That means East Penn will continue to have 4 seats on the Joint Operating Committee. There's an open house scheduled for November 14th. Its focus is really on 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. There's early registration. If you do that, you get a t-shirt, and there is also a drawing for an iPad. So if there are kids out there that want to see what LCTI is all about, please sign up. And then finally, Ken Midget, who is an instructor at LCTI in the plumbing and HVAC area, was recognized as the National Plumbing Instructor of the Year. So that it speaks highly of what they're doing up at LCTI, and we have one of our instructors get that award. That's my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Champagne? Dr. Munson?
Yeah, I had a question. I know a while back we talked about LCTI at least thinking through whether or not to revise how they apportion seats. Is that still an ongoing discussion?
No, the calculation methodology, when your colleague at Lehigh provided us information, was agreed to by the board, and that methodology is really essentially documenting what they had been doing for probably the past 20 plus years. So there's no change in the approach. It just formalized how it would be handled, and that's why the seat calculation for this year is no different than what it was for last year.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you for your report. Moving on to legislative. Mr. Ballard?
Thank you, Dr. Bacher. This will no doubt warm your heart, but the State House and Representatives are in recess until Monday, October 21st. They haven't been around to cause too much problem. They're waiting for the election. There are a few things that have gone on. There have been hearings by the Special Education Funding Commission, which is a committee of the legislature, to discuss special education funding. And out of those hearings, some interesting facts have occurred. Since 2013 and 14, state special education funding has increased an average of 1.5% per year, but special education costs have increased an average of 6.1% per year. So they're 4.5% or more behind every year for a compounded 6 years. So we're looking at quite a bit of additional burden on the local taxpayers in the special education area, but they're getting an earful. I know that some of the local school districts, I believe Bethlehem and Parkland, have testified at one of their hearings and said how much their costs have increased. And I know our costs have increased quite markedly over that same period. So they're getting an earful. Whether that gets us any more money or not will be another guess or not. PDE has provided the adjusted Act 1 index for 2020 and 21. The statewide number is 2.6%, and for East Penn, it is 3.0% because of our aid ratio. So that's what we have to work with next year is 3% potential increase in property taxes, not counting exceptions if we would go for them. In the terms of the area of charter change, there's been a big push by PSBA to bring this to the legislators' attention again. Taxpayers have spent $1.8 billion on charter school tuition. That money could pay for the average salary for 27,000 PA public school teachers. A national study found that Pennsylvania students enrolled in cyber charter schools post significantly weaker academic growth than the average student in a traditional public school. And graduation rates of cyber charters are consistently and substantially below their school districts. In fact, four-year graduation rates at cyber charter schools are more than 31% lower than school districts. They're trying to wake up the taxpayers to understand how their money is being wasted in some of these cyber charter schools especially, and they're trying to get the state legislature to reform the cyber charter and charter school legislation and payments, especially in the areas of special education, where no matter what the degree of special education exceptionality is for the student that the charter schools are taking, they get the same large payment as though they were the most needy of the charter schools, or the school students' needs, and that is just unfair. There's some who just need some minor additional work, and a lot of times the school districts are providing that, and the charter schools do not need that money for special education students, but they're getting it, and it varies so much over the state that the payment for special education students might be $13,000 in East Penn, and it's $20,000 in some of the Montgomery County schools, simply because they have more money in their budget. And the thing is just like our cyber education program, we're able to educate students in our cyber program for less than $5,000, and cyber charter schools are getting the $13,000 that would be for a brick and mortar school student. So there's a lot of inequity in that, in the spending that we're trying to work on. And we'll be discussing those issues at the PSBA's annual meeting later this week, and on the October 18th, our voting delegates will be responding to various initiatives by PSBA and other school districts to add more things to the legislative issues that PSBA will try to be advocating for us for this year. And I wish more of us were going, but for the full meeting to see what the actual learning experiences are for people. It's not a junket. You spend all day running from conference room to conference room. One of my favorites is the sessions that tell the 50 ways to sue your school district from the legal review, and a few other exciting topics like that. And you learn a lot from other school districts on what their programs are and what problems they've had. And it can be an eye-opening experience to meet with some of these people from urban school districts and very rural school districts and find out that entirely different set of problems that they have to deal with. There is one school district in the state, for instance, that the entire school district is bisected by a state park. They have to run essentially two different sets of schools, one on the east side of the state park and one on the west side of the state park, because you can't drive through the state park to get anywhere. You'd have to go around. So they basically have to have two transportation systems, two sets of schools, and try to run a school district that way, with much of their land taken up by state game lands and state park areas that don't pay any school property tax. So, anyway, I'll try to report back, and I'm sure Dr. Munson will report back on what he sees at the sessions, and we'll try to cover as many sessions as we can and get the information to you from that at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. Are there any questions? Ms. Bowman?
What is our cyber education program? I tried to look this up and couldn't find it anywhere.
Do you mean the name of it?
The district's one, yeah.
Yeah, it's referred to as VESPA.
What is it?
VESPA.
Okay.
And there is information online about it.
Now that I know what to look for, I can probably find it. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Thank you for your report. Moving on to announcements, we had an executive session before the meeting today to discuss personnel. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting is Monday, October 28th, here at 7:30. I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.